The Scandinavian defense, but not just any Scandinavian, the modern Scandinavian. Today, you're going to be learning everything there is to learn about the modern Scandinavian, the opening moves, the middle game plans, all the traps, everything. In addition to that, I created a members only video explaining the full theory behind the modern Scandinavian. So if you're trying to learn the modern Scandinavian, watch this full video, apply what I teach, and watch your ratings goes through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region. Today I'm going to be showing you guys the modern Scandinavian defense. Not the regular Scandinavian that we know with queen takes d5. We play knight f6. And this is why we call it the modern Scandinavian, because we're now saying, I don't want to take my queen out in the center of the board too early. I prefer to develop my pieces. In fact, upon developing my pieces, I want to play moves like pawn c6, give you a free pawn, and if you decide to take the pawn, which he did, we take with the knight. Now, we're playing with the black pieces, down by a pawn, by the way, but now it's very easy for us to develop our pieces. Pawn d4 is usually one of the very good moves in which white could play. I like to go bishop to g4 here and just apply pressure to the knight, because the knight is usually one of the main defenders of the pawn on d4. And usually we don't want to try to win this pawn on d4 until our king is castled. Pawn to h3 is a move. Shouldn't be good though, because after we take the knight, if he takes with the queen and we take it the queen, even if he takes here, we check. King has to go here. And it's just weird, to be honest. Like, I'm not seeing a checkmate, but come on, king has to go there. Let's just take on f3. It would have usually persons play moves like bishop to b5, and upon watching this video more, you're gonna see persons putting their bishop on b5, so that way my knight is not able to take on d4. Now it doesn't really matter how he takes. If he takes with the pawn, he still loses this pawn. If he takes with the queen, he still loses this pawn. So he did decide to take with the queen. And just like that, we already won back our pawn. And because we already won back our pawn, the position is equal. We're now the one who is attacking, which means white is now in some real trouble. Okay, he took the pawn. This is where things gets interesting, guys, because knight takes e2 check forces his king to move to e2, which means the bishop doesn't join the game. Issue with this move is queen c6 will always be a threat, and I am kind of scared of that move. What if I start by playing the move rook to b8? If I play rook to b8, the queen has to move. And the question is there a way for him to check my king? Because if he checks with the bishop, we take. If he goes queen here, we take. And the other question is there a way for him to use his queen to defend the pawn on c2? And the answer is no. So before we take on c2, let's use the very famous saying, the threat is better than the execution. Hit that queen first, and then only after the queen move, then we take on c2. And I'm really not even thinking about grabbing the rook. Like, I'm trying to see if I'm able to checkmate this guy. All right, he took on a7. Now we take on c2 with check. There's no bishop check, by the way. My rook will always be guarding, but he is still forced to put his king on e2. All right, guys, I really do not want to be missing any tactics here. And for some reason, everybody in my comment is a tactician. So before we grab that rook, do I have anything better? The answer is no. I don't have anything better, right? Check doesn't work. No other pieces to join the game. So let's just grab the rook. We're still winning. His king is still not safe. And there's still no bishop checks. 3. Assuming he's just trying to hide with his king. He wants to move the king out the way so that way his bishop is able to be developed. I think I need to start making time to get my king out the center as quickly as possible. So let's just move the pawn to e5, move my bishop, get the king out the center. I'm already ahead by an entire rook, so no need to rush too much to checkmate his king. And if you play something like king to f2, queen to d4 for my lower rated players is just completely winning it. You're ahead by an entire rook, just trade the pieces off the board. I may not do that because I'm trying to checkmate the guy. But if you're ever playing against someone at your level, I usually deliberately keep the queens on the board when I'm playing these lower rated guys because I just know that I'm able to mate them. But if you're playing against someone at your level or even 100 points lower than you, then don't get too fancy. You're winning, get the queens off the board. My opponent just made a drawback mistake. As you guys could see, what was the bishop doing on c1? Bishop was guarding this pawn on b2, moving the bishop from c1 to e3, no longer guards this pawn, and that's why I'm able to play the move rook takes b2, check. The king doesn't really have good scores to move to. I'm expecting him to just block with the knight. I still don't want to get too carried away with my attack, but bishop to b4 is applying pressure to the pin piece. Like, if my king is able to just castle here, I mean, it's over anyways. He has a check. But if he checks, I'm just going to move my king over to f8. I'm not going to block with anything. It's not like I really need this h rook in the game. All right, now he's running away with the king, but bro, I have one, two, three attackers. He only has one defender. That's another free piece. Okay, takes, check. Takes, check. Let's do that. Let's just do that. Like maybe I was able to play rook takes with some check, but I'm not trying to calculate too much. I'm now ahead by 8 points. Like what could go wrong here? He took, we check. King is gonna run somewhere, and I'm not gonna be able to checkmate him on the next move because the bishop covers this square, the queen covers this square. I'm just gonna run my king out the center of the board so that way it's guaranteed that he has no checks on my king. Now that it's guaranteed that he has no checks on my king, it makes it way easier for me to bring the rest of the pieces in the game. Queen moves to c5, hits this pawn. We don't really care about that pawn. I need this knight into the attack. So if he takes the pawn, I'm just going to play knight e3. Maybe he will take the pawn thinking he's attacking my rook, which he is. But once I move my knight out the way, the queen guards the rook. He did take the pawn. Now we put the knight here. We're not applying pressure to the bishop. We're applying pressure to f2. We're applying pressure to g2. All right, guys, you guys are about to see some very nice checkmates. You guys are in for a treat with this video. So ensure to hit that like button. Right. So he puts his queen on g5, which guards the g2 square, which is smart because I want to take on g2. There's a check, king up, and then take. But let's play the move pawn to h6 first. Like, if I'm able to chase his king away from guarding g2, then he's going to be getting checkmated. So the queen goes here, still guarding the square. Knight h5 hits the queen. Notice what I'm doing. I'm just trying to do removing the guard tactic. The queen guards the pawn on g2. My queen and my rook and my knight attacks g2. I'm just trying to chase away his queen. The moment his queen moved, he's mated. Well, he decided to give me the queen, so let's just take the free queen. And the funny thing about this is he has to move his king to h2, and this is just going to be checkmate in the next two moves. He moves the king, and to deliver our checkmate, all we need to do is to sacrifice the queen. The bishop has to take. And that's just a checkmate. More modern Scandinavian against 600 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 600. Let's play some more modern Scandinavian. They take the pawn, we don't take back, we play knight f6. This is why it's called the modern Scandinavian, because, I mean, apparently it's trying to say we're not trying to move the queen more than once, and instead we're trying to get the opponent to take on c6, but our 600 rated opponent decided to play d. I don't know why people play d3 and not at least play d4 to control the center. And usually if they don't take on c6, we take on d5 and we develop normally. But let's just go bishop to g4 here, pinning the knight. I'm just trying to give him a chance to take on d5, but if he doesn't want to take that chance, I'll take on d5. Now I'm just going to go knight c6. Okay, he plays h3. Let's pull the bishop back. It's not really maintaining the pin, but I just don't want to give up my bishop for a knight. He develops the knight. I'll also develop my knight, and then usually, if the pawn is on d4, then pawn e6 and castle is good. But because the pawn is on d3, I'm going to play pawn e5. And is there knight takes e5 here, guys? What if he plays knight takes e5? If I take the knight, he takes my bishop. If I takes the bishop, he takes my... Does knight takes e5 work? Okay, I'm not sure. He didn't play it. He decides to pin my knight. So let's just go bishop to e7 and just continue to develop normally here. Then he gave up a bishop for a knight, which persons do this a lot at the lower level. I mean, I'm about to say I'm not sure why, but I'm assuming they're always getting forked with the knight, so they think the knight is a superior piece. Now he pulls the knight back to d2. That's fine. If he wants to trade two minor pieces off the board, that's okay. Now I'll get my king out the center, and let's see where he's going to castle his king. If he castle on the queen side, I'm going to attack him. If he castle on the king side, I'm going to attack him. If he keeps his king in the center of the board, I will also attack him. But before we start too much, let's get the rook on the same line as his queen. Then he castles on the queen side. Now to start my attack, I'm going to play this move pawn to e4. Knight d4 is always good, but I want to just eliminate this knight. Now I'm the one who's giving up my bishop for a knight. But why am I doing this? Because I got something for it. He didn't really get anything when he gave up his bishop for the knight. But me giving up my bishop for the knight, no. Once I take on c3 and he decides to take back, his king is going to be exposed. All right. Guy just does not care, guys. Like he just doesn't care. He's just going for his attack. Let's take expose that king. I mean, if he does not take back, I got a free piece. If he does take back, wow, he just didn't take back. Wow. All right. So takes doesn't do much. Knight d4 hits the queen. I mean, I'm not trying to give that guy the bishop. Let's just pull it back. I could have took the knight, but since my bishop is targeting b2, I'm prepared to play some queen b6 and target his b2 pawn. And remember, guys, this is called focal point. This is how you attack in chess. You try to attack the pawns and the squares that is around the opponent's king, and you always try to look for ways in which you could move your pieces as close as possible towards the opponent's king. So knight to b3, let's go rook to c8 first. Like, let me just put my rook on the same line as his king. And pawn to g6 didn't do anything. It was just a free pawn. I'll take the free pawn. Maybe he wants h5. I mean, he's trying some attack, but my attack is definitely going to come in first because my rook was on the same line as the king. I jump in with the knight, hit the queen, hit the knight. If he decides to take with the knight, I take with the bishop, and I'm already threatening to take on b2. So if he takes on g6, I take on b2. I could be getting checkmated. Okay, he took, we take back. I mean, I'm attacking this pawn, but b2 is really the pawn that I care mostly about. And my fellow viewers, we definitely have a tactic here. And this is not something that I calculated the whole thing. I just, for one, I'm ahead by 4 points. Two, the guy's king is just so exposed. There's no way sacrificing my bishop does not work. And he did not take the bishop. He took here instead. All right, here's how we finish off this game. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take on b6, b2 with check. That's a double check. The king moves over. And now I'm thinking about how am I going to be checkmating this guy? If I check him here, he blocks with the queen, I take. If I check him here, the king runs, I check. Or I could check him here, the king goes here. Check him here, the king goes here. There's a lot of ways to win this game. I think checking him here just works. Once the king move, anytime the e steps his king here, he's putting his king on the same line as my rook. So let's check him here. If the king goes back, that's mate. Running his king in the center doesn't work because now my rook checks the king and I'm also winning his queen. Now I take on e2. My queen checks the king. The king now has to move. Yeah, this is game, bro. What a world we live in, man. Yeah, now I'm just bringing more pieces in the game. I'm not seeing the mate, but I'm bringing so many pieces in the game. I'm just going to keep checking him until I get an accidental checkmate. But no worry to do that because that's just a checkmate. More modern Scandinavian against 700 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 700. More modern Scandinavian coming your way. All right, so they take the pawn, we play knight f6, not taking back on d5 because we're doing the modern Scandinavian. And the whole idea is to play pawn c6, gain some tempo, and then start our attack. So knight c3, again, we're able to take back the pawn, but the whole idea is to sacrifice a pawn, gain a lead in development, and then use that lead in development to get some attack on the king or win back some material. Mm, I mean, some persons you play will not take on c6, but playing a move like pawn to d3 is just weird. Like, why would you be blocking out your light squared bishop? Like, let's just take back the pawn. And anytime they decide not to take your pawn, you take back on d5, and now we have two pawns in the center. Okay, he plays g3. I'm assuming he's trying to fianchetto his bishop. Let's just develop normally though. Like, bishop g2 is fine, to be honest. But I'm planning on playing e5 now. Since he's not trying to make any attempts to have control over the center, I'm just going to have two pawns in the center of the board. All right, so he's continuing with his development. I'll continue with my development, and it's definitely sign that he's going to castle on the king side. So I'm thinking about playing moves like queen d7, pawn h5, pawn h4. This is a very thematic way in which you could attack your opponent's king when they castle, especially when they have this fianchettoed bishop. So he castle, we play queen d7, and by the way, bishop e7 and king side castle is perfectly playable. Remember that we're not playing down a pawn, and because I'm not playing down a pawn, I don't have to go for any all-out attack in this position, but the attack is not bad. It's not like I'm going to lose going for this attack. So bishop to d2, now we play bishop h3. And I was thinking about playing h5, h4 first, then bishop h3. But if I had played h5, I kind of had the assumption that he was going to play h4, and it was going to be a bit harder for me. So I'm just going to leave the bishop on h4 and then move my pawn up to this square. And Anytime you put your bishop on h3, nobody's going to take. If they do take and you take back with the queen, the knight g4, queen takes h2 is going to be mate. F4. Now this is interesting because my plan is to start an attack on this guy's king, but he's playing moves like f4, which means he's also pushing the pawns on the side that his king is on. Here's what I'm going to do though. Because he plays f4, he's exposing his king towards this diagonal. So let me just develop my bishop, gaining some tempo on his king. Now he moves the king out of the way, and this is when things starts to get interesting. If I play h5 now, he's going to take knight takes push. So I'm going to play pawn to e4, not taking here because the moment I take, his rook is active, bishop is active, knight is active. That's too much drama. In some lines, I'm threatening to play pawn to e3 and attack the bishop, but I really just want to get this pawn to h4 and then take on g3, take on g2, and then get my queen to h2. And that's why he played pawn to f5, but it's bad because now he plays pawn f5. My queen no longer guards the bishop. The thing is though, he's only guarding f5 with his rook. I'm attacking f5 twice, which means once I take on f5, that is a free pawn. Then he plays pawn to d4. So this guy definitely has an issue with counting because again, bro, I have two pieces covering the d4 square. You only have a knight. So once I take on d4 once again, that's another free pawn. So now we take. What's his idea? I mean, my bishop is unprotected on the same line as the queen. He pull his knight back to hit the bishop. Let's just pull it back. That was a pawn, but I want to keep my bishop on this diagonal, cutting off his king. Okay, bishop f4 doesn't do much. My king is in the center. There's no way for him to attack it. We play pawn h5. My rook is on the same line as his king, so we are going for that king. Knight g4 to f2 was also an idea. Now he plays knight d4, which means he is attacking my bishop. And I think pawn h4 is fine, but since I'm able to move my bishop out the way and attack his queen, let's just take that tempo. Especially since the queen is now the only piece guarding the knight. So if he moves his queen to a weird square that is not d2, then I'm going to take this knight for free. Okay, he guards the knight. Now we play h4. I'm also threatening to play h3, by the way. Like, if he allows me to play h3, you guys are probably saying, why am I playing h3 and it closes my rook? But it traps his bishop. So if he plays a move that prevents me from trapping his bishop, then I'll take on g3. Also, if I take on g3 now and he plays bishop takes g3, his bishop covers the h2 square. So that doesn't really benefits me too much. And he pulls the knight back, which doesn't do anything, allows me to trap his bishop. I mean, okay. Oh boy. He sacks the bishop. I mean, I could take this way, trade the queen, try to get my bishop on f3 with check. That would win his rook. But knight takes e4 also hits the queen. I'm also threatening to check here, which could win the rook. And the queen is now the main defender of this knight. So if he puts his queen on a square like here, then I take the free knight, and I'm now hitting this rook. And now he has to be careful where he put. The game is over, guys. It's over because my bishop covers this diagonal. The king is not able to move here. All I need is to get him on this light square. He moves the rook out the way, and that's just a checkmate. More modern Scandinavian against 800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800. Let's play some more modern Scandinavian. All right, he took the pawn. We play knight f6, as we've been saying before. Today's not Scandinavian. Today's modern Scandinavian. So we're playing knight to f6 first, and any move they play, we're going to play the move pawn c6. And the goal is, if they take on c6, we take with the knight, and it's very easy for us to develop. Not everyone takes on c6, though. For example, this guy doesn't take on c6. Now, usually when they don't take on c6, you simply take back on d5 and you play it like a Caracan. But let's go bishop to g4 first, because it's gonna be the same thing if we take, then play knight c6, then bishop g4. He hits the bishop. Let's go back. The plan is to take on d5, by the way, guys. But we're just trying to give him a chance to take on c6. We're trying to get a lead in development, but he did. So let's just stay back. And the good thing about him playing this move pawn to d3, not the good thing for him, but the good thing for us is pawn to d3 is also blocking out his light squared bishop. Now he develops his bishop, doesn't really do much. Let's just continue to develop our pieces normally. Knight goes to c6, bishop goes to e7, d6, b4, any one of those squares, all depending on what he does. All right, bishop e2, we play knight c6. And then after he castle, I'm no longer going to play this move bishop to b4. I don't really need a bishop on b4 anymore. So let's go bishop to d6, and point my bishop towards this h2 square in case I could get a queen on the h2 square in the end. I'm also thinking about playing pawn h6, and if he takes, I go pawn takes and just start some all-out attack on his king. That I can do, or I could just simply castle my king. All right, rook joins the game. Rook is on the same line as my king. But this bishop doesn't really have good squares to move to, so it's not going to be a threat right now. Let's just use the time to play productive move. Again, I could castle, but rook to c8 is a productive move. Maybe even pawn h6 after castling is a productive move. I mean, pawn a3 didn't really do anything, and that's usually a sign that the opponent, they're not really sure what's going on. And this is exactly where I like the game to be. And this is like the average person, to be honest. They already develop all their pieces and then they're not sure how to continue after that. I have a very nice plan here, guys. Look at this. Queen to b6 hits the unprotected pawn. No intention of winning that pawn. I'm actually just trying to pin this pawn on f2 so that way I'm able to play this move pawn to g5. And if you, you see, he guards the pawn. Watch this. Play pawn to g5 hits the bishop. If he pulls the bishop back to g3 thinking, oh, we're just trading bishop. You see how he pulls the bishop back? Look, watch this. I take on g3, and then he's gonna think there's a bug in chess.com. Why am I not able to take the bishop? It's just come bugging, but no, it's not bugging, bro. The pawn is just pinned. And I'm threatening to take it the rook. So he has to play something like rook f1 or pawn d4, and that's gonna give me time to just pull my bishop back. All right, so he moves the rook to f1. My bishop is technically not hanging, by the way, but I'm just going to pull it back just to be safe. And I also want to pull my queen back to c7 to threaten some checkmating ideas on h2. Notice how I'm not castling, guys, but usually king is safe when it's behind the pawns. And right now, it's not like there's any clever way for him to get rid of my pawns. All right, so pawn to d4 was played. Let's hit him with pawn to g4. Queen c7 is always going to be a very nice trick, but I need to be a bit more practical. I need to open the g file. If he takes, I need to take and get my knight in the game. And maybe only then queen to c7 becomes very, very strong. So now we take, pointing more pressure to h2. I mean, bishop takes would have also been strong because I'm trying to eliminate the main piece that is guarding h2. He plays g3. The guy just wants no business in anything moving towards h2. That's fine though. Let's put the rook on the same line as the king. There's some very nice ideas coming up. Like maybe there's some sack on g3. Maybe I could play knight takes f2, then bishop takes g3. I just have so many pieces in the attack and I'm ahead in material. This is just completely winning. If you haven't liked the video as yet, guys, please help me to hit 1,000 likes by hitting that like button. It does a lot for the channel. Especially now that he plays rook to e1, I'm sure there's a tactic here. Like, this is sacrifice to expose the enemy king, by the way. That's how I describe it in my book. But I'm going to hit him with this move, knight takes f2. And remember, we find these types of tactics by looking for moves we can play on the opponent's half of the board, which are usually checks, captures, and threats. Now my bishop is able to come into g3 with a check on the king, and I'm attacking his rook. I don't really have a ton of intentions of taking the rook, though. Like, I'm really just trying to checkmate his king. Whoa. He runs his king towards the center, bro. All right, let's go queen c7. I'm trying to get my queen here. Like, think about a queen being on f4, but then the king runs here. So I need my bishop on g6, then the queen on f4, and that's going to be mate. But you see what he's trying to do? He's trying to run his king back to c1. I don't want to allow that. Okay, I don't think I need to use my... Whoa. Whoa. All right, guys, there's tactics here. Tactics alert, right? Check, king has to go here. This is not mate because the knight takes. So if I check, king goes here. Oh, there's also oh my god. Oh no. Check, king has to go here. Check, knight has to block. Takes, king has to step on the same line as my rook, and then it's GG's. Welcome to the modern Scandinavian. It's 2026. So the king move, we give a check here. King now has no squares to go, so he has to block. All right. I don't want to take with the queen because the king runs back. So let's take with the bishop. So that way he has to step his king on the same line as my knight. And I know that he's trying to run the king to b3. So I'm going to check him, but I'm going to put the knight on a5. Oh, no, no, no. I thought he had to block with the bishop, but he's able to run the king here. Oh, boy. Still going to lead to a checkmate, though. Check him here. Give him the knight. Check him here. King goes back. God, where's my mate, bro? All right, let's take on c2 first. Let's not rush it too much. Let's hit the queen and the rook. I'm sure someone is finding a mate that I'm missing. Check. Give him the knight. Check. Okay. Okay. You see what just happens? The king was able to move to a4. So now if he moves the queen, I check king takes, that's just gonna be a mate. Queen moves, check him here. King has nothing to do. Well, I mean, he's able to put the king here or here. We can always just pre-move queen to b6 because once the king takes, that's just a checkmate. More modern Scandinavian against 900 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 900. Blessing you guys with some more modern Scandinavian. They take the pawn. Remember, this is the modern. Queen takes d5 is fine, but it's 2026. Let's play some modern Scandinavian. We go knight f6. Any move they play next, we're playing pawn c6. Any move that comes next. Knight f3, we play pawn c6. The whole idea is just to develop with tempo. We want to give them the pawn on c6. We want to give them the opportunity to take so that way once we take back, we're now developing our pieces with tempo. So he develops the knight. Let's develop the bishop to g4. And remember that we're down by a pawn, guys. So very rapid development is very important here. h3 we don't take. Let's pull the bishop back, maintain the pin on the knight. Usually it's good for them to play moves like d4, bishop e5. For some reason, a lot of people play d3 and block their bishop in. This guy didn't block the bishop in. That's good. Let's play e6. And bishop to c5 does not work, guys. Let's take back. He gave up the bishop for the knight, which is good because usually the knight threatens the pawn on d4. Then he plays d3. All right, let's just finish our development here. Develop the bishop, get the king out the center. He also develops his bishop. Let's get the king castled. I'm assuming he's going to get his king castled. Maybe he's going to castle on the queen side, which is bad, by the way, because I already have this open line. Everybody plays g4. That's fine. Let's pull back. Usually the sack doesn't work in this line, so let's just pull back. The issue with his position is where is he going to get his king castled? Because the king is not safe in the center, definitely not safe on the king side. And if he goes to the queen side, then I'm going to be able to attack. Now he plays d4, which is why it's always puzzling when they play d3 then d4 because it's just wasting time. Let me just use the time to bring more pieces in the game. For example, rook to b8. Rooks needs files. I'm attacking the unprotected pawn. His king is in the center, by the way. We know the saying, if someone's king is in the center, then the goal is to open the center. So my plan from here is to also get rid of some of these pawns. Okay, offense is the best defense, he says. He didn't protect the pawn. He attacks my knight. It's fine though. Let's just move the knight out of the way. Because if he takes on d5, I take with the e pawn, which opens the e file. And then I'm going to be able to play moves like rook to e1 and check his king. He doesn't have to do that though. I mean, he could still play something like b3. And I like the idea of knight b4 to target his pawn on c2. The good thing is I'm attacking, he's defending. Guy's still ahead by a pawn. h4. Doesn't care. He wants to push this. All right, that's a pawn though. Like, if he push, then my bishop is gonna take, and that's another pawn. So he's not just giving us free material. Maybe he thinks he has some sort of attack on my king, but his king is in the center. Now he takes, which is also helping me to open the e file pointing towards his king. Remember, guys, do not trade if it helps the opponents because to take is still a mistake. So he attacks my bishop. I could check his king first, but let's just take on c2. I mean, I have to move the bishop anyways. Why not just hit the queen? And my plan is to play rook e1. So if he puts the queen on the same line as the king, rook e8 is strong. If he plays queen c1, I'm thinking some bishop a3 ideas. So that way I'm putting my bishop on the same line as his queen. But I mean, he's always able to play knight e5 after the check, but I'm always able to play f6 and apply pressure to that pinned knight. So he did attack the rook. Let's swing this over first with check, forcing that king to move. All right, so he blocks the check with his bishop. My rook is still under attack. There's a check here, the king moves. There's a check here, the king moves. Queen here and then check here. The king moves. Oh, there's a check here. That's what I calculated. The king moves. Then there's a check here. The king moves. And then queen here. And if he takes my rook, that's a checkmate. No, it's not. There's king here. No, it's not. But he blocks with the knight. All right. I want to sack, but sack is usually good if I'm able to get my queen here. So let's say I go here. He takes the rook and then I sack. Why am I trying to rush this game? Let's just defend the rook. Let's not rush the game. Let's just protect the rook. All right, he plays h6. I'm trying to sacrifice something, guys. I'm really trying to sacrifice something. Takes, get my queen here. All right, I still need to open this. Oh, actually, let's just take on d4. because the bishop is pinned. No need to rush. Take on d4, he's not able to take back. So he plays rook h3, just to protect the bishop. I mean, the guy's really trying to defend his position, but this bishop is still pinned. So I'm still going to take on g5 because pinned pieces don't protect. So even though the bishop hits my unprotected bishop and the bishop hits my unprotected queen, this is what happens when you leave your king in the center of the board. All right, knight moves to b3. How do we finish him off? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. He has enough defenders. I could take pawn takes, check him here, and then the king has nowhere to go. So the whole idea is to check him here, and then the king runs. But if I take here first, the rook covers this whole entire rank. So maybe he's just going to take back thinking I'm trading, but I'm not, bro. Because that's just a checkmate. More modern Scandinavian against 1,000 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,000. More modern Scandinavian coming your way. Once they take, we play knight f6, hit the pawn, and any move they play, we're going to play pawn c6. The whole idea is to get them to take on c6, help us to develop our pieces, and since we're playing with the black pieces, it should be very good for us. Now, he plays bishop to b5, pinning our knight. I still like to play bishop to g5. Even if they do not have a knight on f3, still play bishop g4. Because after you move your bishop to, let's say, f5, he's going to be so weak on the dark squares. And there's going to be some very nice tactic that could happen on these dark squares. But for now, let's finish our development. Let's play pawn e5. Let's develop our bishop to b4 or c5. And let's get our king out the center of the board. And bear in mind, guys, we're only down by a pawn. So everything that I'm about to get in this position, just keep in mind that we are only down by a pawn. For example, he plays knight f2 trying to castle, hit him with bishop c5. There's no castling that is going to be happening anytime soon. He develops his bishop pinning my knight. All right, that's not a bad move. Let's just get our king out the center of the board. And then he plays queen to d2. So queen to d2 means he's trying to castle on the queen side, but I have a little trick for him. Let's play queen to b6. Why is queen to b6 a nice little idea? For one, I'm threatening to just check his king and be like, hey, okay, bro, you're not going to get castled. But two, I want to get my bishop here because the queen and the king is on the same line. I'm not able to get my bishop here though because of his bishop. So I am going to hit him with pawn to h6. What is this called in chess tactics? It's called removing the guard. And yes, I have a book coming up. Yes, the book is finished, but I'm just allowing my one-on-one students to use the book first. I'm trying to see the improvements in their chess first. Come on, bro. Like, not only did he move his knight away from guarding his bishop, he puts his bro, that's a knight. Lock in. Watch this. Your bishop is still hanging, by the way. What is this? Pawn d4? Okay, maybe he's just so scared about what's happening here. I think he's panicking or something. All right, my bishop is under attack. What if I go bishop b4, allow pawn c4, grab this, and then grab this? Let's do that. So bishop to b4 hits the queen. This bishop is hanging. This bishop is hanging. If he plays pawn c3, fine. I take this bishop. We're now ahead by 2 pieces. And if he takes this bishop, then I take another bishop. This is GG's, Mr. 1000. Okay, now we take and we're completely winning. Okay, he moves the queen out the way. And by the way, guys, moving his queen from d2 left his knight unprotected. This is called the drawback principle. But if I take his knight, he takes my bishop. So do we have anything that is more forcing? Let's say we hit him with queen c4 check. If he blocks with the knight, we grab the knight. Yeah, let's do that. Because then if he moves the king, then his king is on the run. Nobody wants to have their king on the run, right? I check him here, the king goes back here. I mean, I'm not really seeing how I'm going to be able to checkmate this guy. But if I check, okay, he blocks with the knight. That's very bad. Because my bishop is still hanging, yes. But if I take his knight and he takes my bishop, all sorts of discovered attack is going to hit him. And by the way, he's just not able to take my knight. I'm now ahead by what? 3 pieces? Okay, he took with the queen. Now let's see what we can do with these discovered attacks. I can check him here, but the king runs and I'm not really seeing what I have. I mean, the threat is better than the execution, right? So let's take on d4, hit the queen. We're bringing more pieces in the game. I could have also taken the rook. I think it's best if he just sacked the rook because I could have took the rook. He didn't sack the rook. All right, if I take the rook now, if I take the queen now, he takes and I'm ahead by 5, so it's completely winning. Can I checkmate this guy though? That's what I'm interested in. Knight e2 or knight a2 is double check. The king goes here in both scenarios. Queen takes a2 is what I'm going to play because I'm ahead by so many material. I don't mind giving back some material. My whole goal is to checkmate here, but the queen guards the checkmate. So let's swing the rook in the game and apply more pressure to c3. In some, oh my God, I just missed a move. Oh no 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 no! That was bad. That was bad. Both knight e2 and knight b3. Whoa! I missed a checkmate in one. That is embarrassing. Uh-huh. All right, let's lock in, guys. I think I have something here though. We check. King can't go here. King can't move. Queen has to block. Now that the queen has to block, we're able to take here. But his king is gonna run, which is why I'm gonna take. Whoa, am I missing any checkmate? Now I'm getting scared. Check, there's king up. So we check him here first. If the king runs here, I take, and that's mate. So the rook has to block. And if the rook block, that's not a checkmate, but it's gonna be checkmate after. Whoa. He runs with the king, and that's just a checkmate. More modern Scandi against 1100 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1100. We're still playing some more modern Scandinavian. Now, after they take the pawn, we play knight f6. The Scandinavian we already covered with queen takes d5. Now we're playing the modern Scandinavian with knight f6. Okay, knight to f3 was played. He's not trying to hold on to the pawn or anything, he's not trying to be greedy, but we're still going to play the move pawn c6. We want to give him a chance to try to get a free pawn, but we have our idea. Our idea is to develop our pieces. And okay, this guy's like, you know what? I'm not taking any material. If they play like this, then it just means you got back your pawn. So now you have two pawns in the center. The opponent only has one pawn in the center. All right, he checks the king. I'm just going to develop the knight to defend the king. We're not afraid of any knight going to e5 or d4 because, that would be a premature attack. Pawn to d4 was played. And from here, I'm trying to complete my development. If you guys notice, we already developed the knights. Now it's time to develop the bishops. The thing about this is, if I play pawn to e6, I'm blocking in my light squared bishop. I'm not trying to block in my light squared bishop. So I'm going to play the move bishop to g4, pinning this knight to the queen. Then my idea is to play e6. Now, because he plays h3, my bishop is under attack. We're not going to be giving up the bishop for the knight. So let's just pull the bishop back to h5. And then the simple plan is to play e6, bishop e7, and castle the king. Or e6, bishop d6, and castle the king. So the opponent continues to develop. Let's go pawn to e6. All we're trying to do here is normal development moves. We already have three pieces developed. He plays a3. I'm assuming he's trying to prevent us from going bishop to b4 to pin his knight. But let's just go bishop to d6. So already 9 moves in the game. We already have all 4 of our minor pieces developed. Goal is to get the king castled. Once the king is castled and we move the queen, then we've achieved everything that needs to be achieved in the opening stage of the game. Now watch what my opponent is doing. He puts the bishop on e3. Then he's moving the bishop from e3 to g5. That's breaking opening principles. Doesn't do much though, so let me get my king out the center of the board. Now the opponent decides to castle the king, and we already have a little tactic here. Now, if you guys are able to see what I'm about to play, then that's good. One could say it wins material, others could say it doesn't, but here's the whole idea. So if you notice, the knight is the main defender of d4. The queen is also protecting d4, but my knight on c6 is no longer pinned and is attacking d4. So what move am I going to play here? I'm going to simply play the move bishop takes f3. I'm attempting a removing the guard tactic. Tactic will be in my upcoming book. Book is finished, by the way. The cover is finished. The back part of the book is finished. We're just doing the final stuff now. Some of my one-on-one students are already using the book. So I'm just trying to see if there's any mistakes in the book or, if I said something in the book incorrectly. Have some patience. I want it to be perfect. But after queen takes f3, notice how my knight on f3, his knight on f3 no longer guards the pawn. The queen on d1 no longer guards the pawn. And that's why we're now able to play knight takes d4. And just like that, we're already ahead by a pawn. Not only that, we now have 2 pawns in the center of the board. I'm hitting the queen and I'm attacking this bishop on b5 as well as the unprotected c2 pawn. So queen goes over to d3, guarding the pawn. keeps the bishop guarded. And okay, bishops are in fact better than knights. I don't necessarily want to take this just yet, but my knight is under attack, so we definitely have to react to that move. And I also don't want to play something too passive, you know? I like the idea of just playing queen to b6, but let's just take on b5. Because if I move my queen away, then he's going to want to take on f6 and expose my king. Now that he took with the knight, I okay, I'm ahead in material, so trading should be okay. I don't want to pull the bishop back this way because then I disconnect my rook. So I'm going to pull the bishop back this way, getting out of the spin, so that way it's easier for me to connect my rooks. Now I'm only ahead by a pawn, but that does not change anything. We will be trading pieces off the board. Now he's centralizing his knight. There's two things I could do here. Move the queen so that way my rooks are connected, or just start swinging the rooks in the game immediately. Both of these are good moves. Once I play one of these moves, it's fine. So let's move the queen out the way. Now the rooks are connected. And remember what I said to you guys, and I'm going to say this a lot. I'm currently on move 15, and move 15 should not pass. And your king and your two rooks are not the only pieces left on the back rank. If you have more pieces on the back rank by move 15, you did something incorrectly in the opening. Now the opponent played pawn to b4, which means he's weakening the c4 square because a pawn is now no longer able to guard c4. He's weakening the c3 square because a pawn is now no longer able to guard c3. And the pawn on c2 is weak because it's a backward pawn. What am I going to do? I'm just going to swing my rooks in the game. I mean, could have also used this rook. I don't think it matters. Now, if I'm talking about this is left weak, this is left weak, and you're not really understanding why is c4 weak, why is c3 weak, why is c2 weak, then it means you need to be able to understand the definition of a weakness. And a weakness in chess is a pawn or a square that cannot be guarded by another pawn. And these pawns or squares are usually located on the third or the fourth rank, assuming you're looking in from black's perspective. Now he's putting his rook on the same line as my unprotected bishop, so we need to be careful. With that being said, knight to f5 becomes a threat. One principle I'm going to be following here is the principle of neutralization, and that's why I'm going to play this move pawn to h6. And the principle of neutralization says, do not allow the opponent's pieces to be on your half of the board or point towards your half of the board. Now he pulls the bishop back. Now I'm going to play the move rook to c4. The plan is just to double up my rooks on c4, target the pawn, target the knight. If this knight moves out the way, he could be losing his bishop. Knight to f5 does not work, by the way, even though my bishop is unprotected on the same line as the rook. If he plays knight f5, I would have just take the knight, then take the bishop. So he decides to pull the knight back to f3, moving the knight out the way and keeping the bishop guarded. What am I going to do? If you do not have any tactics in your position, simply ask yourself, what piece do I have that is not doing anything and how do I improve it? And it's very obvious that my a rook is not doing anything. So now I play the move rook ac8, doubling up my rooks on the only file on the board. Now I'm already targeting the pawn on c2 twice. He's only guarding it once. So he guarded it again. And I'm about to break principle, guys. Now remember that chess is not just about. Okay, I was about to break principle, but my opponent didn't play the card move. I was about to play pawn to g5, and then once the bishop move, I play knight e4, which attacks the bishop, which will be unprotected since the queen is on the same line as the rook. But because he plays rook to c1 guarding this pawn, good intentions, but his last move has a drawback. What was the drawback of the opponent's last move? The rook on a1 was guarding the pawn on a3. The rook no longer guards the pawn. So now I play the move rook to c3, hitting this queen on d3, and I'm attacking the unprotected pawn. Now that the queen goes back to e2, still thinking about playing knight e4 because it hits the queen. He is able to sack the rook, and then if I takes, he takes my bishop. But then at that point, I take his knight, and I'm still going to be ahead in material. So let's just go knight to e4, hit the queen. This is still hanging. Remember, the threat is better than the execution, guys, and I could now confidently say black is just winning because we're winning a pawn here. He has to be careful where he puts the queen. Otherwise, he's going to be losing his f2 pawn. So he moves the queen out the way. And okay, the queen is on a square where it's keeping this pawn guarded. The plan was to eliminate the bishop. And then once I eliminate the bishop, I'm able to take on f2. But I also have a very nice move here. And that's this move pawn to g5. Now, why am I playing pawn to g5? Why am I pushing pawns on the side that my king is on when you should not push pawns on the side that your king's on? For one, I calculated and I know that, okay, there's no way for him to sacrifice, expose my king, and start a checkmating attack. But in addition to that, notice my queen is on the same line as his king. Because of that, he is not able to simply play bishop g3 and his bishop is safe. If he puts his bishop on g3, I'm just going to take it and I'm just going to be ahead in material. He saw that and decided to sacrifice the bishop. So let's just take the free bishop. And just like that, we are ahead by an entire piece. His pawn on a3 is still hanging. I'm having some ideas of just tripling up on the file. Knight e5, not bad. I'm assuming he wants to bring his queen in the attack. All my pieces are basically guarding each other. Very, very safe position here. And I am also looking to trade some pieces off the board. So I'm going to play this move, bishop to f6, hit the knight, knowing that he's able to go knight d7. Appears to be a fork, forking my queen and my bishop. But I'm just going to go queen back to d8, hit the knight, guard my bishop. And once he takes the bishop and I take back, we are doing exactly what we want to do, which is to trade the pieces off the board. So he took, let's just take back, and he plays f3, chasing away my knight. Very interesting move. Remember, offense is the best defense, guys. Not because the guy played f3 means we have to immediately react to that move. We find good moves by looking for forcing moves. Now, before moving the knight, I'm going to play the move queen to d4 check. I'm basically giving him a chance to blunder. He doesn't necessarily have to blunder. If he moves the king to h1 or f1, then he's blundering his queen. He had to play this move, king to h2. And even if I check him again, and he goes back, he's still blundering, but he's just going to go back to g1 and okay, I don't want to draw the game. I'm trying to win. So what I'm going to do here is I'm thinking knight g3, and if he takes, I check, but the king goes back. And if I check here, the king goes back. So that still does not work. Kind of don't want to move my knight, to be honest, but I just have to do what I have to do. Let's just pull the knight back. Now he's trying to trade pieces off the board, and okay, again, this is not how it works. I've played against a lot of persons who play like this. It's like, okay, they're down in material, but then they initiate the trades. That's not how it works. Now I'm gonna lose this pawn. Well, I don't have to lose this pawn. Yeah, I'm not gonna lose this pawn. I thought I had to lose the pawn, but I'm able to simply guard the pawn. And remember that once you're winning, you trade pieces, not pawns. So I could take this pawn, let him take this pawn, but we don't trade pawns, we trade pieces. So now I'm able to take this pawn. Now I'm just ahead by 4 points. This pawn is also going to be hanging. Now he's trying to get his king in the game. I'm also going to get my king in the game because we are in the end game and king activity is crucial in the end game. Now he plays h4. Again, we don't want to trade pawns, but there's literally no way for us to prevent him from doing this pawn trade. So what are we going to do? Do what we know we should do in the end game, which is to attack the opponent's weak pawn. It would have actually been better for me to take and then check and take the pawn, but this is also fine because I'm still hitting both pawns at the same time. All right, let's take back. Now I'm giving him a chance to protect the pawn though, but okay, he pushes the pawn. Now we play rook here. I only have a minute on the clock, by the way. I'm not sure how my time got this low. Looks like I did too many explaining. He hits the knight. Let's play f6, which hits the rook, guard the knight. This pawn is still guarded. Rook still has to move. Then we simply take on b5. All right, now the king goes here. I'm trying to see if I'm able to set up some little checkmating ideas. Let me just improve my king, trying to see if I'm able to put his king in like a checkmating net or something like that. Or maybe I should have allowed his king to come down because once he pulls his king back, I'm not seeing anything. Okay, he hits the knight. Before I move the knight, I'm going to go rook here, just attacking the unprotected pawn. Pawn to g3 is a move that guards the pawn. My knight is not under attack, by the way. So even after this king move, I'm still doing okay if I play, let's say, pawn to e5. He's not attacking my knight because of the pin. You know what would be interesting though if he plays pawn to c4? Because then if I take on c4, then he's able to take. If I take with the rook, then he trades. Didn't do that though, so let's just take the free pawn. Now I'm ahead by 6 points, but I only have 30 seconds on the clock, so let's speed up a bit. He's going for the trades. Nah, we're not gonna trade like this though. Like instead of just trading, even though we're ahead in material, knight e4 wins the game. Because now I'm forking his king and his rook. King now has to go somewhere. We'll take the free rook. King move, we grab the rook. King moves. Now I'm just trying to take the last pawn, trade the last piece off the board, and with 20 seconds on the clock, I should be able to just pre-move everything and then just deliver a checkmate. He's not going for the trade. Finally, he's not trading while he's down in material, but now it has to be a checkmate. With my rooks working together like this and my knight on this square, I just need to take with check, and this will lead to mate. If he goes here, I check. Now the king has to move, and then once the king goes here, that's just a checkmate. More modern Scandinavian against 1200 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1200. We're still playing some more modern Scandinavian. So once they take with the pawn, we play knight f6, not taking on d5, because this is the modern Scandinavian that we're playing. And any move they play, we're going to play the move pawn to c6. I explained the full modern Scandinavian theory in the membership section side of YouTube. So if you want the full theory of the modern Scandinavian, including all the full theory of every other opening video that I make, just check the membership section of YouTube. You have to pay $2 and some cents to get access to them, though. No, oh, by the way, I didn't explain. Some persons are not going to take on c6, but if they don't, you do. And now it looks like a Caro-Kann defense. It really looks like a Caro-Kann defense, like the exchange variation of the Caro-Kann, where you just develop your pieces normally, which means you get very, very quick equality. And bishop d3 is also inaccurate move because now we're able to go bishop to g4, pin the knight, and keep in mind, the knight is the main defender of this pawn on d4. So if he's not careful, we're going to be eliminating this knight, winning a pawn on d4. Okay, and that's why he plays bishop to e3. He knows that his knight is kind of overworked, so he puts the bishop on e3 just for more support. But let's just continue with our development here. Bishop is going to d6, get the king out the center, swing the rook on the file. Very simple game. h3 hits the bishop. Let's pull the bishop back, maintaining the pin on the knight. No need to give up the bishop for the knight here. C4. Guys being very aggressive. Let's pull back again. If he trades a knight take, then my rook gets the file. Some persons play knight e5. Anytime they play knight e5, I love to take on e5, pull the knight back to d7, and attack them on e5. A3. A lot of persons play A3. I'm assuming they're assuming that I want to go bishop to B4 and pin the knight. Now, I'm going to play the move rook to C8 before playing bishop to D6 because sometimes after playing bishop D6, they go here, hit the bishop, and it's best to pull the bishop back to B8 if you have to move the bishop. And as I mentioned before, if they play knight e5, I love to take on e5. It's also very similar to some French setup, pulling the knight back to d7, and all of a sudden we're targeting their pawn on e5, and this pawn could be classified as an overexerted pawn. I mean, he could take on a7, but in a lot of cases, pawn to b6 could trap the bishop. He plays f4. I'm not going to go bishop to queen h4 check because he's able to block with the bishop. So now I'm just going to focus on my development, especially since I know that, okay, maybe he wants to take on a7. So let's just go bishop to c5, develop my last piece, guard a7, and if he takes, I play knight takes, and then just get my king out the center. Also, I want you guys to notice that this king is not safe in the center. This king will not be safe on the king side, and if the king goes on the queen side, I already have so many pieces ready to attack that king. Okay, now he plays f5. This can't be good. Like, this really cannot be good. Now, it looks like I'm getting my bishop chopped. That's what it looks like, but bro, first of all, your king is not safe. What am I gonna do here? I'm gonna check his king. Actually, nah, I'm gonna take first. Let's just take first. And then after I take, then I check the king. So that way he's gonna be forced to move his king. And then I'm gonna be able to play bishop h5, hit the queen. And eventually I'm gonna be able to get my king out the center. Like, my dream in this position is to get my king out the center and just keep attacking his king in the center. I'm expecting something like king f1, which is what he played. And tactics alert. Isn't this a tactic? Just sack? Because if I sack bishop takes and I check, I'm winning back the bishop. I mean, okay, I'm able to check him first. I'm also able to check first. Let's actually, no, if I check first and he moves the king and then I take, let's say he puts the king here, rook f1 could be a bit annoying. So I think it's best if I just take on f5 first. And then after he takes, I check, pick up the bishop, we're ahead by a pawn that he's going to be able to regain on d5. And if I castle, there's knight e7 check. So still a weird position, but with a king being that exposed, this game should be over very soon. But let's see. Oh, wow. He actually saw that he's not able to take due to the check and he played immediate queen to f3. So he's just trying to be in a safer position. I'm considering knight takes and then after pawn takes, but my bishop is just going to be under attack. I don't want my bishop to be under attack. So I'm just going to take with the bishop with check. And then after he plays his move, I finally get my king out the center. Now, in addition to that, I also noticed that my rook is on the same line as the queen. So I'm thinking about some f6 moves. And I'm assuming he wants to put his queen here. But let's play this move pawn to f6. And by the way, he's able to play queen takes d5 with check. I'm just going to move the king. Like, my whole game plan is to be able to take on e5 with check. And if he plays queen takes with check and I move the king, I'm now threatening to take on e5 with check, and I'm also threatening to take on h3 with check. So in this exact position, I have two threats. And in a position like this, bro, you do not want this rook coming in the game. So, okay, I was about to say I'm expecting pawn e6 not to open the file. If I takes with check, the queen blocks, and then he's threatening mate. So maybe I don't. Maybe I don't want that. Unless once I take with check and he blocks with the queen, I'm able to check him here. And then I play knight takes and then I protect checkmate on g7. I mean, again, guys, there's gonna be certain things. For example, let's say he had played queen g2. If you're around 1200 and you're already ahead by a pawn, and then the queen blocks and then you're winning another pawn, it's over. But I just personally know that I'm able to just beat these guys, you know, with or without queens, or just keeping the queens on the board and winning their queen instead of trading queens. But now that his king is so centralized, look at this. Boom. Didn't even have to say tactic alert to play a move like this. Why is knight takes d3 so strong? Because okay, I was about to say if he takes, I pin, but then I noticed that my queen is actually guarding my knight. So I am only threatening this move knight to f4 check. This rook is not doing anything though, so I need to swing it in the game. Queen h5 was played, and then he resigns because he blundered his queen. But more modern Scandinavian against 1300 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1300. We're playing some more modern Scandinavian defense. So once they take, we play knight f6, hitting the pawn. And whichever move they play next, we're just going to play the move pawn c6. Some persons are going to be like, yo, let's not get greedy. Let's not take that pawn. But if they don't take the pawn, we take the pawn. Some persons are going to be slick playing pawn to d6. I mean, I'm assuming he's trying to say, you know what? At least if I take with the pawn, then I do not have two pawns in the center. So I'm actually going to take with the queen, you know, just to help me with development a bit. Now he plays the move pawn to c4. Eventually, I'm going to play pawn to e6. So let's get to our bishop outside of this pawn chain. And it looks very, very, very similar to the actual Scandinavian, where my queen goes to a5, then to c7. But let's see what's happening. He develops his knight. I'm also going to develop my knight. Then he develops the bishop, which means he's trying to get some trades here. All right, here's what we're going to do. No, I'm not going to trade. I'm going to go bishop to g4, pinning this knight because this line is now slightly different. I'm currently threatening to eliminate this knight and then take a free pawn on d4. So pawn to h3 is not going to help. Notice what just happens. I move my bishop from f5 to g4, moving the same piece more than once in the opening, but he moves his bishop from d3 to e2, moving the same piece more than once in the opening. Now we play the move pawn e6. I'm just trying to finish my development. Slightly uncomfortable to get my dark squared bishop in the game. He got his king castled. Let's just put the bishop on e7. And the funny thing is, if he had played h3, I would consider the fishing pole trap. But he plays pawn c5, queen d5, knight c3, queen h5, pawn h3. Sacrifice on h3 is an idea. But let's not go for that. Let's just pull the queen back to c7. We're still targeting h2. And now that he plays this move, pawn h5 takes, there's knight e5. And after takes, I'm threatening mate. He is able to play f4. Nah, there's no f4 due to bishop check. And if he plays g3, yo, let's go for the fishing pole trap, guys. We are good. When was the last time someone seen me going for the fishing pole trap? It's been a while. My plan from now is to castle on the queen side, line up my rook on the same line as his queen. And from here, it's just an attack. Like, I'm not expecting him to take, you know, for two reasons. One, the fishing pole trap may work here. That's one. Two, he's going to be probably like, yo, guy's a chess master sacrificing a bishop. I'm not taking that piece. But if he just looks what's happening, my queen and my rook is obviously lining up towards h2. So he moves the rook out the way. And we're getting our king out the center of the board. Tactics are come on, bro. Like, might as well you had took the. You see what just happened? He plays knight e5. We already explained that we're going to be putting the rook on the same line as the queen, which means I'm just going to take. You know that I was actually planning on taking on c5 and then the pawn is not able to take due to the pin? No, I'm going to take on e5 and that's just a knight. And I'm still not expecting him to take with the pawn. I mean, might as well he just takes with the pawn and be like, hey, because you're now down by a piece, bro. So are you just going to play down by a piece? No, he decides to take back. And taking with the knight here is interesting, but I'm just going to choose to take with the pawn because I think it's very, very, very important that I open this h file for my rook. He's about to get checkmated though, for sure, for sure. Pawn to g3. Okay, knight check. Bishop takes, queen takes. So let's not rush things. Tactics alert, by the way. You know what I'm gonna do? Punish him for having the queen on the same line as my rook. Taking on c5. Now I'm ahead by even more material. And the good thing is, I'm still threatening to take this pawn on d4 for free. Taking the bishop on f4, very interesting. I mean, I thought he was gonna play bishop e3 to at least guard the pawn, but now I have two pieces attacking. What if I just take with the queen, take with the rook hits the queen, force the queen to move, sack my rook. After he takes, I check. After the bishop takes, I take on f4. Still hitting the bishop. It's weird. Takes, let's say the queen goes here, right? We check. Surely let's just take on d4. Like maybe if I was down in material, I would have looked for ways to complicate the game. But why complicate the game when I'm ahead in material? I'm ahead by +3 here. I'm hitting this pawn. My rook is on the same line as the king, as the queen. My bishop is on the same line as the king. My rook has this very strong open line pointing towards his king. There's going to be some very nasty sacrifices to checkmate this guy. Okay, he moves the queen to b3. He's moving the queen off the same line as the king, and it's a bit scary having his bishop on the same line as my queen. So I'm going to play the move pawn to g5, but this is also not just like a scary pawn sacrifice. Like if he takes on g3, he's getting checkmated on the spot. So I think it's best if, well, if he takes this pawn, he's getting checkmated on the spot. I think it's best if he just tactics alert, tactics alert, tactics. Yo, can you find the tactic here? Be honest. Be very honest with yourself. Can you really find the tactic here? First of all, the bishop is on the same line as the king. You need to see that. Second of all, the queen attacks the pawn on g2. You need to see that. What move am I going to hit this guy with? Remember, find the best move by look for moves on the opponent's half of the board. These moves are usually your checks, your captures, your threats. Knight f3, check, and it's over. Because once he takes with the bishop, 10 pieces don't protect. So this pawn no longer guards g3. We play queen takes g3, check. If the king goes to f1, that's mate. If he blocks with the bishop, then that's just checkmate. More modern Scandinavian against 1400 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1400. We're playing some more modern Scandinavian. Once they take, taking on d5 is fine, but this is the modern Scandinavian. And yes, there is a video available explaining the full modern Scandinavian theory in the membership section of YouTube. So go to the members only section and check that out. Now, after they play any move, I like to just play pawn c6, giving them the opportunity to take a free pawn. But my whole idea is to try to gain a lead in development playing with the black pieces. So that's my plan. So he did take the free pawn. Let's play knight takes, and notice what is happening here. We have two pieces developed. The opponent has two pieces developed, but it is my turn to move, and I'm the one playing with the black pieces. Now, whenever you're trying to find a square to put this bishop, I recommend that you put the bishop on g4 while playing the modern Scandinavian if you're going to play this line where you're sacrificing. Usually in the Scandinavian, if you're not going to play sacrifice and you're playing solid, I say put the bishop on f5, but you guys already know because I already made a video on that. All right, he develops the bishop, pinning my knight, and now I'm thinking about playing pawn to e5. But because my knight is pinned, I'm worried he's going to play h3 and then g4 and then take on e5. So let's just play the move pawn to e6 for the time being and just focus on our development. Like all I want is a little lead in development. If I'm able to get that, then I'm fine. He castled the king. Let's go bishop to c5 and get my king out the center of the board. Also, a very important plan for white is usually to play d4, and the opponent immediately played d4. And that's a very nice move, by the way. I was just about to say he's not able to play d4 because I'm able to eliminate the knight and then take on d4. But now that I'm looking on the position, if I take on the knight and he takes with the queen, my c6 knight is going to be under attack twice. So even if I take with my bishop or my knight, then he takes on c6 twice, and that is, in fact, very good for him. Okay, that was nice. Let's pull the bishop back to e7. So putting the bishop on c5 wasn't the best right now. I thought putting the bishop on c5 was preventing d4. It wasn't. The knight is still pinned. Rook e1. Now we castle the king. Now I'm attacking his pawn on d4. So if he's not careful, now the plan is to eliminate the knight and then take on d4. And playing the modern Scandinavian, that's the whole idea. Now, one thing that we're going to try our best not to do is trade too many pieces off the board. So he plays bishop to e3. Why can't I still take on f3 though? Like, aren't I just still winning the pawn? It's not like he's gonna play pawn takes and expose his king, right? So takes, queen takes, knight takes. There's queen takes b7 though, but then knight takes e2 hits both rooks. But then he has rook to d1, which hits my queen, and then the game gets so complicated. But since it gets back the pawn, we're gonna go with that idea. And okay, now the opponent has like a little bishop here. Maybe he's just gonna take on d4, and then if I take on d4, he takes on b7. At that point, I'm thinking bishop c5, and just try to immediately start some attack on his king. So he did take. If he plays rook to d1, then I'm just going to play queen to b6, and he's not ahead in material anymore. But if he takes on b7, then he's going to be ahead in material and he's going to be attacking. But he didn't play rook to b1 and he didn't take on b7. So I'm not going to try to use this opportunity to start some attack. I don't want to be too passive defending my pawn, so let's go bishop to c5 here, putting my bishop and applying more pressure to his f2 pawn. He is guarding the pawn, and now he plays the move rook to d1. All right, the rook is on the same line as my queen here. We have to be very careful. You guys know what's happening. Someone puts their rook on the same line as your queen. Please be very careful. So let's move the queen out the way. There is queen to b4, which is pretty strong because it hits the unprotected pawn. I like queen to h4 though, because now we're applying pressure to the opponent's focal point, and if he allows me to play knight g4, then he could find himself in some trouble. But then he plays pawn to h3. Very mature move. The guy's like, you know what? I know you want to play knight g4. Let's just play h3, just preventing anything from going to g4. Well, there's two things that I'm noticing here. For one, we have opposite colored bishops, and whenever the game goes into opposite colored bishops, it's very likely that the game could end in a draw. So I'm going to switch from that plan back to the queen to b4 plan. And I was thinking about going bishop to b4, pinning the knight and eliminating the knight and double up his pawns. But my pawn on b7 is still hanging at the end of the day. So he plays knight e4, hitting the bishop, hitting my knight. I don't want to take the knight because after he plays queen takes, he hits my queen, he threatens his mate, and if I have to trade, then the opposite colored bishop position could just end in a draw. So instead of doing all of that, I'm just going to keep my knight in the center, allowing him to take my bishop, just so that way it's not an opposite colored bishop type of endgame. All right, so he took the bishop. We're taking with the queen. Right now, what is happening is the opponent has a bishop, which is better than a knight, and I have a knight. But usually, what I say is, if the knight is in the center of the board, then it is equal to a bishop. Right now, the opponent's last move didn't really do anything. So what I'm thinking of here is just to swing one of my rooks on the open file. And remember, guys, rooks needs file. So let's swing this rook in the game. Rook to c8. That was a trick. The guy is threatening a checkmate. So let's not get checkmated. Let's play pawn to g6. Then he played pawn to b4. Another thing that you guys need to keep in mind is whenever someone's knight is in the center, it is very strong to try to chase that knight out the center. So I'm going to go knight b4 though to attack his bishop. There is a little idea that he has, just taking the free pawn on b7. But I think I'm able to regain the pawn if I just play rook to b1. And then after the queen move, I take on b2. And then this pawn is going to be hanging. Okay, he decides to save the bishop, also saves this pawn. Yo, this guy's playing some chess, by the way. I don't want to allow him to play queen takes b7 anymore, so let's pull the knight back to... It's kind of passive, though. I don't like to play passive moves. It's kind of passive, to be honest. Maybe rook here? Yeah, let's just... Rook here, he's just going to take, though. That's the thing. Let's do it. If he takes, I should be able to go rook b8, and at least my rooks are active. Also, if he takes on b7, then I'm able to take on c4. Like you should only play these passive types of moves if you have to. Like pulling the knight back, only play those moves if you have to. The thing is, I also have another plan, pulling the knight back. Like if I'm able to pull the knight back, then put my knight on d4. Again, bishops are better than knights, but if you're able to keep your knight in the center of the board, then it is at least equal to that bishop. And right now, this bishop isn't really doing much since it's pointing towards a pawn chain. Okay, so he took the pawn. Let's just take back the pawn. And if he takes on d8, I take back on d8. I'm attacking his pawn on a2 twice. Don't really have a lot of intention of taking that pawn, because then my queen is going to be a bit overworked. Like, okay, he's trading. That move I was not expecting. Think he's just trying to win my pawn on a7, which is not a bad move. But rook to d2 gives me some initiative. It attacks his pawn on b2. Now, one thing I'm noticing is queen is preventing any form of checkmate on f2, so that's not bad at all. But his b2 pawn is also hanging. I'm down by a pawn, by the way, guys. And another thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is the knights are usually better than the bishops if you're able to have all of the action taking place in one place. So if I'm able to like get my knight over to the king side, then my knight is going to be better than that bishop. He pulls the queen back, the queen was already guarding the pawn. He should have at least tried to hold on to this pawn, but he didn't. So let's just take the free pawn. A3, facing away that knight. All right, so I'm definitely thinking about just centralizing my knight. Let's just keep the knight in the center. My rook is unprotected, by the way. I'm currently thinking about rook to c8, rook c1 check, maybe queen e5 and pick up my rook. But if he plays rook here, I think I'm just going to go queen back to a6 and preventing him from checking here. My knight is very strong in the center. Oh, I'm attacking his queen. I didn't even see that I was attacking this guy's queen. So he decides to save the queen. All right, very weird position. I may have to show you guys some very, very technical endgame technique. Now, queen to d3 is a slight mistake because once I take on d3 and he takes on d3, now he has two unprotected pieces on the same line, the bishop and the pawn. So now I'm able to play rook to b3, hit the bishop, then I'm going to be able to take the pawn. Now, one thing he could do is go bishop c4, and then after I takes, but my pawn is going to be a pass pawn. Again, this guy's playing some chess, but now we have him in the end game. And if you guys want to learn the end game, I have a 4.5 hour end game course on my Patreon. Feel free to get that. The link is in the description. But let me show you guys how I'm going to try to convert this into a win. Now, if he's going to take the route of just taking my knight, he needs to check and then get his rook behind my pawn, but he didn't. He just immediately attacks the knight. No, I think he wants to decentralize the knight. I think I'm just going to protect the knight. And if he takes, I must take with the pawn and then just try to run my king to protect the pass pawn. Let's do that. We're now in the end game, by the way, guys. So king safety is crucial in the end game. If he takes with the bishop and I take it with the rook, he's just not going to trade. And 4 pawns versus 3 pawns is a drawn position. In fact, if my opponent plays very well, then the position is just going to be a draw. Okay, he's trying to get his king in the game. Let's do the same thing. Let's try to get our king in the game. King e2 would be a very heartbreaking blunder, by the way. I mean, if someone has a knight, it's very important that you're looking out for forks. But all I'm trying to do here is just to get my king as active as it can possibly be. All right, so he moves the rook out the way. Maybe he's trying to put his rook on my 7th rank. Doesn't do too much right now. Let's continue with the plan, rook e7. And if he checks here, I go king here. So that way my king keeps this pawn guarded. And okay, I kind of want to play king e5. Can't play king e5 because this pawn is going to be unprotected. But I have some plans to try to trade. All right, so let's go h5 first, just trying to be patient. Knight check is also an idea. And one idea that I have is to put the rook here, hit the bishop, put the rook on c7, and then try to trade the rooks off the board. I don't really want to trade anything though. So if I can go without trading anything at all, then that would be good. Okay, pulls the bishop back. Already I'm able to check him here, but then once he puts the king here, he's attacking my knight, and I don't want to trade. I could check him here, and then once the king move, I pin. Let's do that. I think that's an idea. Let's check the king, because if he puts the king on any weird square, then I'm going to win this pawn. If he puts the king here, I pin the bishop. Another thing that you guys need to be able to do in the endgame is to create threats. Like, always create little tiny threats in the endgame. For one, it's very annoying, and they usually really work. Okay, he puts the king back. That is not a good sign. Knight f5 I like, hits the bishop with some ideas of checkmating his king. I also like the idea of just hitting the bishop like this. Let's start with knight f5. Since it hits the bishop, it covers the square. So he has to be careful where he puts the bishop. Otherwise, he's going to be getting checkmated on the back rank. Oh my god, he was not careful, which means that's just a checkmate. But more modern Scandinavian against 1,500 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,500. More modern Scandinavian coming your way. They take the pawn. We play knight f6. He plays knight f3. We play pawn c6. Okay, we're seeing persons taking the pawn. Let's just take back with the knight. And I've seen a lot of bishop to b5 here, which develops the bishop and pin the knight to the king. Okay, but we're also seeing pawn to d4 this time around. I like to go bishop to g4 and just pin the knight to the queen, because the knight is usually one of the main defenders of a pawn. So if we're able to eliminate the knight, we will be able to win this pawn. But right now, the plan is not to focus on winning pawns. I like to just use this time to get my king out the center of the board. And by the way, queen a5 does not win material because knight c3 blocks the check and defends the knight. So let's go pawn to e6, get the bishop out, get the king castled, and then our target is going to be the d4 pawn. So king is castled. Let's develop my bishop. Already this pin is very annoying, by the way. Knight is developed. Now my king is castled. No, I want to eliminate the knight and take on d4. And I have seen persons taking on c6. Let's just take back. Pawn h3 was played. And by the way, I can eliminate the knight and then take on d4, but then he's going to take on c6. So let's just pull the bishop back, maintain the pin on the knight, pawn to g4. Okay, first of all, we don't push pawns on the side that our king is on. It's very tempting trying to take here, but after queen to d3, he really just quickly gets out of the pin. So let's just pull the bishop back. We're not able to punish him right now for pushing pawns on the side that his king is on, but eventually we're going to be able to punish him. Knight e5 hits the bishop, hits this pawn. Guy's also playing very aggressive, and he's ahead by a pawn. All right, queen to b6, I usually play in these types of scenarios, but then he has pawn g5 hits the knight, and then I move the knight. Knight d7 is a fork. So let's put the queen on c7. Let's just put the queen on c7. So that way we're not getting forked on d7. We still have to be careful. One move I have to be aware of is bishop f4, putting his bishop on the same line as my queen. But if bishop f4, I go bishop d6, and I should be doing fine. I want to play rook to d8 and then start targeting his d pawn. I wasn't really expecting him to take on g6 this quickly because now bishop f4 is not possible. Maybe he wants bishop g5, but that doesn't do anything. Maybe the guy wants to play bishop e3, but it's kind of a passive move. But we already got what we wanted out of the gambit. Like, we got an exposed king. We have very good development. We also have a target on d4 to attack. Okay. Okay, queen f3. He wants to develop the bishop, but he wants to gain a tempo while doing it. So because I know that he wants to put the bishop here, I'm going to voluntarily put my queen on b6. And okay, it's not like I'm being scared trying to run away from bishop f4, because now it's you kind of have to start double guessing if he wants to move the bishop, because if he moves the bishop, then he loses this pawn. He pulls the knight back to e2, assuming he wants to play pawn c3. Let's use the time to start swinging our rooks in the game. And eventually, I'm going to try to start attacking his exposed king. Now he plays pawn to b6. All right, pawn c5 I like. Takes, takes, then I target this pawn. How do we get to this guy's king, though? That's the thing. Knight h7 to g5 is an idea. I'm going to wait until he puts the bishop here before I do that. So for now, let's go rook to c8, because eventually I think I'm going to play c5 and open the d file. Playing c5 will activate his bishop, though, so it's still very tricky. All right, so he develops the bishop. I mean, my pawn on c6 is a weakness, so let's just play c5. Don't trade unless it helps your pieces. Pawn c5 helps my rook, and if he takes it, helps my queen, but it also helps his bishop. So maybe I could say this trade didn't really, it cancels out to each other. Helps him, helps me. Then he plays pawn c4 just to protect his pawn. And now I'm going to go knight h7. Now I'm trying to attack him. And this bishop is definitely stronger than this bishop. So I'm thinking about moves like bishop f6, which means I'm trying to eliminate my bishop, which is not necessarily a bad bishop, but his bishop on b2 is a great bishop. All right, he got his rook on the file. Very strong move. Let's continue with the plan. Hit the queen, hit the pawn. Now we're trying to start some attack on that exposed king. Then the queen goes back to g2. All right, so the queen guards the pawn. So now I need to find ways to continue with my attack. This is already being targeted. Can't attack him along this line. Pawn is unprotected. Let's play queen a5 and hit that unprotected pawn. I'm also thinking about some rook to d2 idea to hit the bishop and the knight. For rook d2, I need to be aware of bishop c3 though, but let's see what he's going to play here. Maybe he's going to play a3 guards the pawn with some ideas of playing b4. But instead he plays a4. I don't like that move, bro, because now I'm just going to pull the queen back to b6. I kind of wanted my queen on the same line as his king anyways, but now my queen on b6 is attacking his unprotected pawn. Okay, so he plays knight d4. Knight d4 guards the pawn. I think his position is going to slowly start falling apart because pawn e5 hits the knight. Maybe he's going to go knight f3. Then I take the bishop, so I'm thinking bishop takes here. With that being said, I like the idea of playing bishop c5 hits the knight, knight f3, then I take hits the bishop. And if he takes my knight, I take his bishop. Oh, wait, I think he also wants to put the knight here, which doesn't really do much, because if he puts the knight here, I play a6, and I'm just going to chase away his knight. So this is just me trying to do a removing the guard tactic, by the way. The knight guards the pawn, I attack the knight, so that way I'm able to win the pawn. My knight on g5 is now left unprotected, by the way, and we know that unprotected pieces causes tactics, so we need to be a bit aware of what's happening. There's knight c6 that I actually didn't really think about, because if I take the knight, he takes my rook. But if he plays knight c6, I'm just going to take his rook first, then take his knight. All right, pawn a5, a move I was not expecting. It's a very cool idea because I'm noticing if I take on a5, there's knight c6. I'm just not going to take, though, to be honest. I'm just not going to take. That was a nice move, by the way. Maybe I should go. Where do I put the queen, though? That's the thing. Because if I put the queen here, there's knight c6. Okay, maybe I could go queen a5 and then just eliminate the knight. Like the moment I eliminate the knight, then I should be able to win the pawn. If I have to move my queen, I want to put my queen somewhere where I'm able to take one of those pawns on the next move. For example, let's say queen a6. Still applying some pressure to the knight, but I can't take here due to this fork. Now he plays h4 to hit my knight. I want to take, eliminate his knight, but once he takes, I'm just going to be forced to move my knight. So let's just save the knight first. In some cases, I'm able to put my knight back on f6. So he plays g5. Guy doesn't want my knight on f6, but now I want to take on a5. If I take on a5, I'm forked. So let's eliminate the bishop, then we take on a5. So we got the pawn. Whose king is weaker here? It's actually very debatable because his bishop is very strong. Like if he finds a way to batter his queen and his bishop on this diagonal, then my king is going to be weaker. But if he's not able to do that, then his king could be weaker. All right, he plays rook takes. If I take here, he's just going to double up. So let's just take here first, and then after the bishop takes, I take here. Now rook to a1 is also a very strong move. Hits this pawn. If he plays rook a1, I'm just going to go queen b4. If he takes this pawn, I take this pawn, and then his c pawn is going to be under attack. My main issue now is my knight on f8, like on h7, because I have no good forward moves for the knight. I want to be able to pull the knight back to f8. All right, queen b7 was played. Very nice move. Hits this. Position is equal, though. Okay, how does this work? Hit the bishop. Bishop takes. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Especially now that the time is running out, I'm going to try to transfer my pieces to start an attack on his king. Like queen takes is a very strong move here, by the way. I do not want to trade. But if he plays queen takes, I swing my queen over to f5. And now I'm threatening to play queen to g4 check and hit the king and the bishop at the same time. Okay, bishop takes was played. All right, I think I'm just going to continue with the same idea. I mean, if there was a way for me to get my knight in the game, though, he's threatening this, though, so I have to be careful. Let's just move over the queen. I don't think I'm able to sacrifice my knight. Like, unless I'm able to play, if I'm able to play something like rook b3 and then swing the rooks over, then that would be nice. All right, he pulls the queen back. f6 I like. If he takes, my knight joins the game. If he does not take, I take, and then my knight still joins the game. Pawn f4 would be a very nice move. Also, we need to realize that the guy has connected pass pawns. So he just needs to realize that he needs to start rolling these pawns up the board and he should be fine. All right, he pulls the bishop back. Clearly, he's just trying to play against my bishop. Now I'm going to go here, hit this unprotected pawn. If he takes, I'm still going to take. The queen still guards this pawn. Okay, he rolls the pawn up the board. If I take, I'm assuming he's going to take. And then if I takes, he's going to play queen takes. I mean, I want to say at least my knight joins the game, but I do not want to lose too much material. I'm going to do it though, because he already has the pass pawn rolling up the board. He continues to push the pawn up the board. This guy, bro. All right, maybe I'm just going to, let's just get the queens off the board, especially since I have more time on the clock than him. I'm just going to get the queens off the board and try to eliminate this pawn. How am I going to win the game? I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just going to have to win this on time. Okay, we don't want to play rook takes. Pawn push is very strong, so let's play pawn takes. And then I'm going to try to go rook to c8 and grab this pawn. All right, rook here. He wants to push, and then he wants to go rook here. But let's just immediately attack that pawn first, and then he guards the pawn. Now he's not able to push due to take, which means he wants to put the bishop here, then push, then play here. So I need to ensure that I'm in time to get my knight over in the game. So maybe knight back, bishop here, knight up. Very good. All right, let's pull the knight back. We have to be fast here. Knight e6, just to protect the c7 square. I also need to get my king in the game. There's a lot of stuff that I need to do here. So bishop f4 was played. Now we go knight e6, hits the bishop, making it harder for him to play pawn to e6. Bishop now has to move, and then I want to just get my king in the game. Oh, whoa, 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 what a move. Okay, this is lost. This is so lost. He's just gonna push. Okay, I'm probably gonna have to just flag him. Yeah, I'm probably gonna have to just flag him. Very unfortunate. But 30 seconds is also a lot of time to not lose. Okay, let's go here. Plan is to go d4, hit the bishop. Okay, why did he why did he sacrifice here? I'm gonna blame it on the time. He really didn't need to sacrifice. I'm just gonna blame it on the time. Position is more than likely still very drawn. But with 20 seconds on the clock, one of us is gonna blunder. All right, he pushes the pawn. I just want to keep my king. Oh, fruit. My pawn is time is also low. I want to keep my king attacking this pawn. So that way, if he push and I take, I win this pawn. If he push, I take with check. He moves the king. Now I'm able to roll this pawn up the board and I win the game. That was crazy. Very crazy. Now I'm just winning the game. Ay, ay, ay. Is this stalemate? Not a stalemate. Whoa. Good game, Mr. 1500. All right, this is now just checkmate, guys. Whoa. That's just a checkmate, but more modern Scandinavian against 1600 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1600, blessing you guys with some more modern Scandinavian. And once they take, we play knight f6. That's what we've been looking on. This guy plays knight f3. We play pawn c6 regardless. And let's see if he's going to take the free pawn. I mean, some persons just won't take the pawn and, they're more interested in finishing their development. Guy plays bishop e2. That's a very passive way to play, by the way. Very, very passive. Let's just take back the pawn. He castles his king. Let's go knight c6, finishing our development. And then he plays pawn to d4. All right, let's just continue to develop normally here. Develop, hit the knight. He develops his knight. We play pawn e6. And then I'm going to play bishop to d6. All right, this guy's developing his pieces very fast. I'm assuming he knows what he's doing. Let's go bishop to d6 here. And by the way, guys, I am not down by any material because he did not take the free pawn that I gave him. So now it's kind of like a Caracan position that we're playing. He plays queen to d3, trying to connect his rooks. Let's go rook to c8, getting my rook on the c file. Eventually, I'm going to castle my king, and we're just going to play a normal game. He hits the bishop. All right, pulling the bishop back is usually good, but going here hits the queen, so that also seems to be good. So let's hit the queen. That seems to be very good. Force the queen to go somewhere uncomfortable. I mean, he is able to go queen b5, hit this pawn. There is queen c7, and apply some pressure to h2. All right, queen goes back to d2. I like the idea of playing knight b4 hits the pawn. But he's more than likely just going to put the rook here. So let's just play h6 and chase away this bishop. I have some plans, guys. I have some plans. Keep in mind that because of how solid my king is in the center, there's no way for him to sacrifice anything and open the center. So if he pulls the bishop back, I am considering playing moves like g5 and g4 to open the g file and start an attack on his king. And obviously, if he gives up the bishop for the knight, then his pawn on d4 is going to be very weak. So he pulls the bishop back. That's what I like to see. Now we play pawn g5, and this is the attack that I like, to be honest. For example, bishop goes back, I could take, but then after he takes, the rook gets the file. So I'm going to go bishop to b4, pinning this knight. And because the knight is pinned, we know that pin pieces don't protect. So automatically, a move like knight to e4 becomes a threat, which is why he plays this move bishop to d3, trying to prevent knight to e4. But I'm gonna play it anyway, bro. Because if he takes with the bishop and I takes, I hit the knight. The knight is the main defender of d4. Okay, I was about to say we take on d4 and we want a pawn, but bishop to e5 is very strong. So maybe we don't take with the pawn. Maybe we take with the bishop and just threaten to double up his pawns. I actually thought he was gonna take. He didn't take. He just decides to pull the queen back. All right, there's one, two, three attackers. I have two defenders. I mean, the knight is still pinned, so technically not an attacker. Pawn g4 takes is an idea, but then after takes, queen takes, he's in a very strong position. I could take on g3, then play pawn g4, trying to chase away the knight. There's a lot that I could do here. Like, what's the best variation to play though? Here's what I'm gonna do. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to just pull my knight back to e7, maneuver my knight to the king side, but I'm also applying more pressure to his knight on c3. So now I have one, two, three attackers versus his two defenders. So now he may I mean, I think he's just forced. Yeah, he's just forced to take. And then once he takes, I could take with the pawn, hit the knight. And then once the knight move, I try to take this. I'm actually just going to take with the bishop because I'm still threatening to take and double up his pawns. And my knight on e7 can now get access to this f5 square. So he jumps in with the knight, trying not to get the double pawns. Makes a lot of sense. I could jump in with my knight. He plays f3, that's a pawn. Oh, that's actually a pawn right now, by the way. But jump in pawn f3, grab there's queen takes. No need to do that just yet. Okay, I think I'm just going to take the free pawn for now. Yeah, or do I just play f6, hit the knight? If f6 hits the knight, he goes back. Let's just take the free pawn for now. Like, it's not really easy grabbing a pawn against someone at 1696 anyways. And the slight risk about my position is my king, but my king is fine. Like, if he has no way to break down these pawns, then my king is just fine. All right, he moves the queen, applies pressure to the bishop. Ooh, look at this. He's attacking this bishop, but he's also attacking this bishop because he's threatening queen b5. And that's one downside of having the king in the center. So now I'm going to take on c3, just so that way I'm not losing my bishop. And then after he takes, then I should be able to just save my bishop, especially with a move like bishop to a5, because it prevents any queen b5 that he may have. Why would he take the c bishop and... Oh, no, I see. Because if I take on d4, there's a check here. The same check. Interesting. I think I have to pull all the way back to a5. Once my queen guards the bishop, I'm not losing anything. My rook hits the queen, by the way, but now if he checks, I'm able to play king here, and then he has nothing. This is something that could happen if you don't castle your king, by the way, but my king is safe. Now he's hitting my rook, and knight c6 should be fine. If he takes, I take. I don't want him to take, and then I'm losing any material here. Okay, instead of knight c6, there's also bishop. There's a lot of stuff that I could do. But because this knight is so active, let's just play knight c6. Oh my god, what am I doing? That was not good, guys. I didn't count. His rook and the queen is also targeting c6. So after takes, there's a very simple rook takes that I missed. All right, so I broke some principles this game. Thought I had the attack. I did have the attack. Completely messed it up though. I mean, I didn't take the pawn though. Guess he doesn't want the pawn. So maybe queen b6. Oh no, queen b6. I'm forked. Knight takes, hits the queen. He takes here first, and then he takes queen. Oh, he's also threatening this. I think his move is just very strong, actually. Very strong move. Takes, takes. Bishop takes, hit the rook. All right, I'm just gonna run. I need to connect my rooks. I'm just gonna give him the chance to take. Queen takes is still very strong because if he plays queen takes, I'm not able to take due to check, and I won't be able to play f6. But if he plays queen takes, I should. Ooh, thought I was able to take on d4 after I saw that he's attacking my f7 pawn. So it's a very tricky position. I'm ahead by a pawn, but looks like he's about to get it back. And he could have simply just played knight takes and then rook takes and take back the pawn that way, but nah. All right, so rook c7, there's knight takes. Rook c7, knight takes it, the queen, take the queen, take the queen, take the queen. Let's do this. If knight c6, I take the queen, he takes my queen, I take the queen, and we're in an endgame. I would love this endgame because now I'm the one who is under attack. If he moves his queen, then I take his knight, maybe play f6 to chase the bishop. My queen no longer guards my bishop, so things could still get weird there. All right. Knight c6, I take the queen. He takes the queen. I take the queen. Now we're in an equal endgame. I think he could have gotten way more out of this though. Because now I have him in the endgame. I mean, I'm good in the endgame. This pawn is weak. I am going to be targeting this pawn. All right, first I'm going to play this move f6 so that way there's no bishop check. I'm also going to slowly swing my king in the game. I'm going to play moves like e5 in the very far future, but not yet. I need to attack this pawn. He's attacking my bishop. Let's just pull back, hit the rook. Rook has to move. I'll take the pawn on d4. No, he has this move. He didn't play it though. He could have played rook c6, hit this pawn. But now I take and I'm ahead by a pawn again. Remember, guys, in the end game, you must attack pawns. And if you're not good at the end game and you want to get better at the end game, there's a link in the description, takes you to my Patreon, which gives you access to a 4.5 hour end game course. But now I'm just going to start rolling my pawn up the board to win this game. This was a roller coaster of a game, though. I had the attack, then I gave it up. He had the attack, he gave it up. Uh, all right, how do I do this? I need to just move this bishop out the way first and foremost, and then just start rolling my pawn up the board. It doesn't get simpler than that. If he takes, I'm not going to take with the f pawn because I need my e pawn to be guarded. So I'm going to simply take with the h pawn and I'm fine. So he took, we take back, king moves, but pass pawns must be pushed. And it should also take him a while to get this dark squared bishop back in the game. Rook moves, keep rolling them pass pawns up the board. All right, rook here doesn't change anything. We're still pushing the pass pawn up the board. Like once I'm able to push the pass pawn, I'm going to push it. Like sometimes pushing a pass pawn could be a bit risky. You don't want to just push the pawn until you lose it. But once I play, let's say moves like bishop a4, the bishop guards the pawn. So I don't even need my rooks protecting the pawn anymore. But now I need to figure out how to get rid of these rooks. Maybe it's just to walk my king all the way up there. Maybe it's to find a good way to trade off the rooks. All right, now he's trying to get his king around. All right, maybe I need to get my king around. Maybe I need to push this pawn up the board. What's the best way to do this? All right, let's get my king active. We're in the end game. No need to rush. He's getting his king in. I'm also trying to get my king in. King moves, I get my king in. If he checks, I'm probably just gonna... Well, I don't want to go here due to this check. So, nah. Another mistake, man. Okay, that's not good, bro. Mathematically, I'm just well, not even to use the word mathematically. This is not just a winning endgame. He didn't need to do all of this, even though the pass pawn was just too strong. But this is what happens when you roll your pass pawn up the board. Check, I move. I have a rook, he has a bishop. Now I have another pass pawn rolling up the board. Once he moves his king out the way, now it's just a matter of start taking off all his pawns. And you want to avoid the dark squares as well. Sometimes you're playing against a dark squared bishop, you put your piece on a dark square and then you lose that piece. King back, I should be able to go here. All right, let's attack this first. Let's do it slowly. I know he's able to go here, but now I go here, hit the bishop, and then after the bishop move, rook c2 checks the king, hits the bishop, and that's GG's. All right, he moves the king. Let's just grab the bishop. Maybe just rolling these pawns up the board is the plan, but this is just winning, and the opponent resigns. More modern Scandinavian against 1,700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,700, blessing you guys with some more modern Scandinavian. They take the pawn, we don't take back, we play knight f6. They make a move, we play pawn c6. And I mean, some persons are going to accept the sacrifice. As we can see, now we take on c6, and from here it's just development. Bishop to b5, it's a nice move. Usually we want to play e5, but if we play e5 now, the knight is a bit wobbly. So let's go bishop to g4 and then pin the knight. And let's try to finish our development first. How I like to do this is to play moves like pawn e6, bishop e7. Okay, he castled the king. Let's go pawn to e6. Then he plays h3 to attack my bishop, and we're not going to be giving up the bishop for the knight. We're going to be pulling the bishop back to h5 and applying more pressure to the knight. Now, he still plays pawn to d4. Eventually, I'm going to just eliminate the knight and then just take on d4. But right now, I can't do that. So let me just finish with my development. I remember one game I played where I played bishop c5, and then I noticed that they were still able to play d4. So let's get the king out the center of the board first. Okay, he develops his knight. King is now out the center of the board, and now there's some ideas of taking on d4. Like again, the knight is the main defender. If we eliminate the knight, we will be able to take on d4. So a move like bishop to e3 here wouldn't be terrible. Should still be able to eliminate the knight and then take on d4, and then queen takes d4. But let's see. Oh, he eliminates my knight, which was the main piece guarding, well, attacking the pawn. And then he plays queen d3. I guess he's trying to get his queen out of the pin. All right, what I'm going to do here is just try to connect my rooks. Let's go queen b6, still applying pressure to d4, by the way. So bishop takes, f3 with ideas of queen takes is possible. But if I had takes and then takes, he would have took on c6 with the queen anyways. So I'm trying to get as many pieces in the game. And I'm also trying to make it hard for him to develop this bishop, because now at least if he develops the bishop, he has to think about me taking on b2. Knight jumps into e5. Guy's playing very aggressive. All right, I'm attacking the pawn once, he's guarding it once. So rook to d8 can't be bad. Just know I'm attacking the pawn twice. Like bishop to e6. Okay, I was expecting bishop e6. Wasn't expect. Come on, bro. That was actually bad. You're 1700, bro. Like protect your pawn, bro. No, we just take the free pawn. By the way, my queen is on the same line as his king, so he must play queen e3. Anywhere where he puts his queen that is not e3, I get all sorts of discovered attacks. He did find queen e3 though. All right, bishop c5, I really like. Bishop c5 is so strong, bro. Because no, it's the same thing. God, yo, the guy's in trouble. I knew he would have done this. Bro, my rook guards the square. Not only did he blunder his queen, because the queen and the king is on the same line, he blundered his knight in the process. Because now I'm able to take the knight and his queen is still pinned. Good game, bro. Well, can't lie. Can't lie. Wasn't a good game. And the opponent resigns. More modern Scandinavian defense against 1800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1800. We're playing some more modern, aggressive Scandinavian. Okay, now we see pawn to d4. So I think my opponent is playing the Black Mardima gambit where if I take on e4, he plays f3, which means he's basically trying to do what I'm trying to do. But here's what we're not going to do, guys. We don't want to take on f3 and allow his knight to be developed. I mean, we want the free pawn, but it's best if we focus on our development. So what I'm going to do in this position is just play the move knight to f6. If he decides to take, then I'll take back. And okay, maybe he's going to be like, but you're moving the same pieces more than once in the opening, which makes a lot of sense. But let's just try to follow principles as best as we can. We don't want to take because it helps his knight. He wants to force me to take. So it's gonna be like it's like we're playing tug of war, to be honest. Now, before I still take, I'm gonna do one last try. I'm gonna play this move, knight c6. What am I doing? I'm kind of giving him back the pawn on e4, but in return, I want the pawn on d4. So he eliminates the knight. Let's take with the f pawn, and then he's gonna take and attack my bishop. His pawn on d4 is still hanging, but once he takes it, the bishop, I'm not gonna be able to take back. I'm forced to move the bishop, but I prefer to finish my development instead of trying to chase free pawns. And before taking the pawn, he plays pawn to d5, attacking my knight. That's fine though. I'm just going to centralize my knight. Once my knight is in the center of the board, I should be fine. And then once he plays pawn takes, I just need to find a good square for my bishop. And then from here, it's just going to be development. Let's pull the bishop back, maintaining some attack on this pawn on e4, which is only being guarded by the knight, by the way. So if I'm able to play moves like bishop to b4, hit the knight, then I'm going to be trying to eliminate this knight. And then I could be winning this pawn. So he develops his knight, not going to take. Let's just develop the bishop, pinning the knight. That was the idea. Now you could see I'm threatening to take on e4. Still want to get my king out the center of the board. Like, I usually don't feel too comfortable grabbing pawns with my king in the center. Like, sometimes I do it though, because a pawn is a pawn. But you have to be very careful getting greedy in the opening. It's very important that you finish your development first. Okay, queen to d4, not bad because for one, he's attacking my bishop. Two, he's guarding this pawn. And I guess he's trying to say, hey, I'm about to eliminate that bishop. But it's fine. Let's just take. Because if he plays queen takes and I play bishop takes, I am ahead by a pawn. If he plays pawn takes, then the question is, where is he going to castle his king? Like I'm going to simply castle my king this way. And yes, he's attacking my knight twice and I'm only guarding it once, but his king is in the center. So if he decides to take twice and I hit him with rook to e1, he's losing the game, which means what he needs to focus on here is his development, which is why he played bishop to e2. All right, now I'm trying to see if I'm able to play moves to keep his king in the center of the board. Because if I'm able to keep his king in the center of the board, then I'll have the initiative. Not seeing how I'm going to do that though. So let's just try to get more pieces in the game. Right now, my target is this pawn on e4, which is a weak pawn. Why is it a weak pawn? Because it's a backward pawn. And remember, guys, it's very important that you know the definition of weaknesses. Remember, a pawn or square that can't be guarded by another pawn is a weakness. These are the things that stronger players are able to see that lower rated players don't see. And this is why, even in a position where it's not very obvious what I'm going to do, I still have a plan. Because if I'm not able to attack someone's king, I look for something that is still weak, slight weaknesses. And this is why grandmasters are better than me, because they're able to see even slighter weaknesses in the position. That's how you get good at chess. Okay, so he decides to castle his king. And I'm trying to see how I'm going to be targeting this weak pawn. It's very important that we do not rush. So I'm going to play this move, queen to e7. I'm trying to apply as much pressure as possible to e4 before I move my knight out the way. And there's some cases where I'm able to take on f3, but if I take on f3, he's just going to play pawn takes f3 and the pawn is going to be safe. Now, another thing that you guys need to be good at is maneuvering your pieces. For example, once this knight moves out the way, I'm going to have three attackers versus his one defender. But then where am I going to put the knight is important. I'm thinking about putting the knight on d7, then to c5, and then e4 is going to be under attack. So he plays rook to e1. Like he sees that the pawn on e4 is going to be targeted. But once I play knight d7, I'm now able to just full time attack this pawn. It doesn't mean that I'm going to immediately win the pawn, but at least you guys know that that's what my plan is. And even if it's a case where I don't just outright win the pawn, then I'm going to be attacking. He's going to be defending. Also, look on the guy's last move, rook from A to E1. What does this mean? It means the rook no longer guards this pawn. And remember, we're higher rated players, so we're able to see smaller things that we need to do. Again, maybe a normal person is like, okay, bro, after the opening I don't know what to do. Look for weaknesses, unprotected pieces or weaknesses. Hit him with queen to a3 before playing knight c5, because I also don't want to have my queen on the same line as the rook, because even if it's a case where I win the pawn, I don't want to be going and capturing with my queen. So queen to a3 is a very good move, and I think I'm just going to be winning the pawn on a2. It's not like he's going to go rook to a1 and protect the pawn, because that's going to be a very passive move. Now he plays knight to h4. Very good move, by the way, because my bishop is like one of the main pieces attacking e4. And I think he's just trying to eliminate my bishop. Now, if I take on a2, there's this move, rook to a1 hits the queen. And if I move the queen, rook to b1 traps the queen. So again, we still have to ensure that we're being as patient as we possibly can. Well, let's just continue with the plan. Knight c5. We're not in any rush. a2 is hanging. I'm targeting the bishop. I'm targeting e4. If he takes on g6, we just stay back. And I do not have any real weaknesses in my position, and that's how you should be playing. Like, you're not going to be able to just have no weaknesses, but if you're able to play without any real weaknesses that the opponent is able to attack, then you at least can't lose the game. Only way you lose is if you make some huge crazy blunders. So he took, we take back. Also, whenever you have this pawn cube around your king is usually very safe, because even if a pawn comes down and you take, your king is still safe. If a pawn comes down and you take, your king is still safe. Now we have him playing passive moves like rook to a1. Like, this is what we want to see, by the way, guys. Like, he moves his rook off of a file. I mean, it was still doing a defensive role, but this is what we want to be seeing the opponent's pieces doing. Now, this is not a tactical move that I'm about to play, but these are the types of move that could tell how strong you are at chess. Again, I do not have anything tactical. What do I do when I don't have anything tactical? I find a piece that is not doing anything. And out of all of these pieces, this rook is not doing anything. If you suggested something like rook to d1, that's fine, but I prefer rook to e5. Why rook to e5? Because e4 is one of his main weaknesses, and I want to double up on the e file, and then all my pieces are going to be targeting e4, especially if I'm able to like triple up on the file. Like, usually in this case, though, I would actually prefer to triple up with my queen at the back. But let's see what happens. Eventually, also, once you play like this and keep applying pressure to the opponent's position, eventually their position is going to crumble. So again, moving his rook off of a file, putting it behind his own pawn. Now we play rook to e8. Now we have 1, 2, 3 attackers. Yes, he has 3 defenders, but notice what every single one of his pieces are doing versus what every single one of my pieces are doing. And that's exactly how I want you guys to play chess. And also, another thing that helps me to play chess better is I'm able to evaluate position. So once I look on this position, I know that, okay, all my pieces are doing attacking role, all his pieces are doing defensive role, black is better. And by the way, guys, we're currently at the 1800 video. I'm trying to get 1000 likes this video. So if you haven't liked the video as yet, please consider hitting that like button. It really does a lot for my channel. All right, now he plays rook to e2. So I have 1, 2, 3 attackers. He has 3 defenders. My goal from here is to I'm trying to see if I'm able to add any additional attackers to the pawn. And yes, I am able to add additional attackers. It's actually a very nice move. And that's this move, pawn to f5. I'm not necessarily trying to trade his pawn, because if someone has a weak pawn and then you trade it off, then you're not making progress. The whole idea is his pawn on e4 is actually pinned. So if he decides to take, then he's losing his pawn. And you see what he just did? He moves the rook from a1 which is a drawback mistake. Kind of had to do it, by the way. But now this pawn is going to be hanging, which means now I'm free to start trading pieces off the board. So let's just take on e4. And still he needs to be careful because after bishop takes, I'm thinking about playing f5. And then once he moves the bishop, I eliminate the bishop and then try to take his rook. And okay, I can also trade everything. Like if I manage to trade everything here, then I'm going to be winning the pawn on c3. All right, so for example, if I takes and he plays rook takes, I takes, he plays rook takes. Do I have any tactic? Like I could check him here. King has to go here. And then I check him here, check the king, hit the rook, king move, and then we trade everything off the board and we win the game. You see that? What I just showed you guys is also called conversion. Because right now I'm actually not ahead by anything, but I'm able to find a way to win the game. So it's a very nice tactic, by the way. We take on e4 first. Once the rook takes, we take back. And then again, how the drawback principle work is looking on the opponent's last move, see what was not, seeing what the rook was doing. So for example, after we takes and he takes back, we notice that the rook was guarding the background. The rook no longer guards the background. And that's why queen to c1 check is so strong. And blocking with anything does not work. He has to play king to f2. Then we take on c2 with check. And I'm assuming he's going to play something like king to f3 to guard the rook. But something that I've been singing in you guys' ears is from a mathematical perspective, king and pawn endgame is winning. Now, there is going to be like some 5% of the time or some 10% of the time when you have more pawns than the opponent in the king and pawn endgame and you still lose or the game is still drawn. But it's always just winning. So how am I going to win this? Again, look on the video, ensure that you come up with your plan. But step one is to always centralize the king. Why do we start by centralizing the king? It's the same principles in chess. You don't start the pawn storm before you bring your pieces in the game. You bring the pieces in the game first. So before you start moving your pawns, move your pieces first. So he's centralizing his king. Let's get the king as active as possible because king activity is crucial in the endgame. Now he pushes this pawn. I want to get my king here, but I don't want him to just chase my king out. So let's just play the move pawn b6. And I mean, pawn c5 is not a bad move. If he plays pawn c5, I may have to take. He didn't though. Like he's also not making the game as competitive because now I'm able to go king d6. This pawn is just not able to move here. Now my plan from here is just to freeze the pawns. Once I'm able to freeze the pawns, he's gonna be in what is called a zugzwang. What is a zugzwang? Zugzwang is basically a scenario where the opponent basically don't want to make a move because if he does make a move, then he's just losing. So I need to figure out how to do this zugzwang. Pawn to g5, pawn to, well, I mean, pawn to g5, pawn to h3, pawn to g6, and if he puts the king here, we go pawn to f6. Or pawn to g5, pawn to h3, pawn to f6, and if he puts the king here, we go king here. Very good. And that's the zugzwang. I'm also able to play moves like a6 or a5. I'm just trying to let him run out of moves. So he pushed the pawn. Now I go here. So that way a king is never able to go here once I run here. And even if he tries to come all the way around here, it's going to take him too much time to put his king here, then take here, then here, and here. That's just going to be bad for him. So he moves this king out the way. Now we're able to play king c5. And again, if the king goes here, we take. So what did he do instead? He moved his king to c3. But once I play king to b4, my king now have what is called entry into his position. And once I take his pawn, my a pawn will just roll up the board. Let's move the king out the way. Now all I'm going to do is roll the pass pawn up the board. And that, my friend, is exactly how you win a winning king and pawn endgame. And he resigns. More modern Scandinavian against 1900 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1900. We're playing some more modern Scandinavian. Pawn takes d5. We play knight f6, not immediately taking on d5. And after any move they play, we play the move pawn c6. And my idea is to sacrifice a pawn in order to gain some time. Some persons may not take the pawn, but if they don't take the pawn, for example, and play a move like this, and then I take the pawn, now we're kind of like in a Karakan where I have two pawns in the center. He only has one pawn in the center. And I'm actually going to just play this position like a Karakan. So he develops both of his knight. I develop both of my knight. And usually the goal is to play e6 and just get the king castle. But we're not able to play e6 right now because it will block in the light squared bishop. So let's get the bishop out first. And he played h3 to prevent bishop g4, by the way. Now he's continuing with his development. We're going to continue with our development. It's very, very simple development, by the way, guys. Like, you don't really need to think about a lot of theoretical move and what moves to play if you just know that you need to develop. Even though I will be creating a video explaining the theory of the modern Scandinavian, it will be available for the members in the members only section of YouTube. But after a move like bishop to d3, usually it's best to just take. I mean, I could pull back. Okay, maybe I should pull back because if I takes, I'm helping his queen. If I pull back takes, and then I takes back, he's helping my rook. And you guys understand that to take is a mistake, and we should only trade if it improves our position. So if I had taken here, it would have helped his queen. So he plays a3, trying to prevent me from pinning his knight. Let's just develop normally. That's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to get all four pieces developed and get our king castle. He got his king out the center. Before I castle, I will castle, by the way, but usually moves like knight b5 is very annoying. And I like to meet knight b5 with bishop b8. Bishop b8 is not good if the rook is on a8, because then, okay, you're blocking in the rook. So I like to go rook c8, putting the rook on the open file first. It is also a productive move. Like sometimes you could say you're breaking principles, but you're not really breaking principles if you're still being productive. For example, let's say I don't castle my king and I play something like queen to b6. Does it mean I'm breaking principles? Not really. Because for one, he has no way to even attack my king, and queen to b6 is still a development move, which means the moment I castle my king, my whole entire development will be completed. Every single pieces are going to be active, which means what I'm doing is I'm developing, but I'm also gaining tempo while I'm developing. All right, now to keep the game spicy, I want to hit him with knight e4. Pawn c4, he's probably going to play though. So let's not get too ahead of ourselves, and let's get the king out the center of the board first. Pawn to c4 was still played, and I think he just wants to play c5 and fork. And if I takes pawn push, and then that's okay. Maybe it's not too strong, but because the bishop is on the same line as my queen, I just want to be a bit careful. I'm going to pull the bishop back to b8, and then if he plays pawn c4, I move the queen back to d8, not c7, because bishop to f4, and he's going to trade anyways. So I'm just trying to pull my bishop back just so I don't get forked. And playing pawn to c4 or c5 is not bad for him if he understands the whole idea of just rolling these pawns up the queen side. However, his pawn on d4 is weak. So if you notice, he is rolling the pawns up the board, but his d4 pawn is weak. Now I'm going to try to start my attack on him. I'm going to play the move knight e4. Now I'm trying to move my pieces forward. Some cases I want to go queen to c7, but it will never work if he's able to play bishop to f4. I also want to play moves like f6 followed by e5, so that way if he takes, I have two pawns in the center. If he plays b5, hits the knight, I may just maneuver my knight to the king side. I'm thinking of knight a5, because in some cases I could get my knight to c4, but let's see. Okay, knight to f4 was played. Didn't play bishop f4. Knight no longer covers this square. This bishop seems to be a bit overworked though, right? Because the bishop guards both knights. So if I eliminate this knight and he takes, okay, but the knight is also guarding the pawn. I thought I was winning material here. Maybe he just wants to take on g6, and I don't really want to allow him to do that, to be honest. Let's just go bishop to f5 and save my bishop. Like, he could force it by playing g4, but at least then I could say, okay, bro, you're pushing pawns on the side that your king is on, and I'll be very happy with that. Okay. Does that mean now that he moves away the knight, does that mean no? His bishop is overworked? I mean, his last move is attacking e4, so we have to be careful. But let's do some calculation. Let's say I eliminate this knight. The bishop eventually has to take. Anytime that bishop takes, we take a free pawn. And then if he takes, then we're always able to take back with the pawn, and we're still guarding our knight. So I think we're just winning a pawn here. It's crazy how we thought we were winning a pawn, but he made a drawback mistake. Now we're going to be giving up our bishop for the knight because his pawn on d4 is gonna be captured. And this is why I told you guys that the whole idea of rolling the pawns up the board wasn't bad, but his pawn on d4 was very weak. So he did take the pawn. Knight c3 hits the queen. Queen moves. Okay, knight c2 hits the queen. If the queen goes here, knight here hits the queen, but then the queen takes, so that doesn't work. So I'm just going to take the free pawn, just like that. We're already ahead by a pawn, which means from here it's just a matter of conversion. Any trade we get, we're going to take that trade. If he plays knight takes, pawn takes is strong. If he plays bishop takes, pawn takes is still strong. The whole idea is just to ensure that my knight is guarded. Now my knight is guarded, we're officially ahead by a pawn. Now he got his rook in the game. It's very important that we look on the opponent's last move. And I think we have a tactic alert. That's crazy. Look at this. Rook goes to e1. The first thing that goes off in my brain was knight c2 is a fork. And I'm like, I can't fork on c2. The queen is going to take. And then I'm like, yo, the bishop is on the same line as the queen. So what happens if I just move this pawn out the way first? Like if I move the pawn out the way, anything he takes with knight c2 becomes a fork. What a tactic. Pawn e3. If he takes with the pawn, fork. Takes with the bishop, fork. Takes with the rook, fork. Moves his knight, fork. Good game. Okay, he decided to play knight c2, decided not to take the pawn. I mean, still gonna fork regardless, so that's not gonna help him. And more than likely, I'm gonna lose my pawn in the process. So why not take on f2 first with check? After king takes, queen check is an idea, but once he blocks with the bishop, I have nothing. So once he takes with the king, then I'm gonna fork. He's able to take, but then I'm just gonna play rook takes. And if we're gonna be trading queens, I'm already ahead by a pawn, by the way. So if he takes the queen, I play rook takes. And I'm gonna use the c rook because knight d6 is gonna be very annoying. There's also knight d6 no, by the way, which hits the rook and the bishop. If knight d6, I think I'm just gonna take this rook because if he takes my rook, I go knight here with check, grab the bishop. If knight d6, okay, he didn't do any of that. In fact, he played a move that is even worse because now that the king is exposed and the knight is unprotected, I'm able to play queen to d4 first. Force him to pull the knight back. Then oh my god, no. Take this rook first. That's what I'm gonna do. Because now once the rook takes, then we hit him with queen to d4 check, which checks the king, hit the unprotected rook, hit the unprotected knight, and that's GG's. Blocks with the bishop. We're able to choose to take any one of these. I'm gonna take with the rook. We're now just winning, to be honest. Like he hits the rook. Let's go here. If he takes, we just take back. That's fine. All right. Queen moves out the way. I mean, this is just winning. We're ahead by like 8 points. So now I'm just trying to ensure that I don't blunder or do anything weird. For example, let's just pull this back just to be safe. There's nothing that he has on my G pawn. I mean, my rook is on the same line as his king, but I don't think I'm going to get anything out of this. Maybe just pushing the F pawn all the way up the board could get me something. Okay, no, I'm just going to win this game. Like, this is the only thing that I wanted to do. I'm ahead by 8 points. Once I trade the queens off the board, it's over. So he took, let's just take back. And even if I sacrifice my rook for his knight, it's just easier for me. Even if I sack this rook for the knight, sack this rook for the bishop, I'm still completely winning. That is called simplification, by the way. What the opponent resigns. More modern Scandinavian against 2000 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 2000, finishing things off with a banger of a modern Scandinavian. We play knight f6 hits the pawn, and most persons are playing knight to f3 here, seeing some d4. We're still going to play this move pawn to c6 and then play knight takes c6. But whenever they're just saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be greedy, then it's not going to be like a Karakan defense type of business where we just develop both of our knights. Pawn h3 prevents bishop g4, so we have to put the bishop on f5. And from here, it's just normal development. Like, if you guys know anything about the Karakan defense, I'm literally just developing my pieces. Okay, bishop to d3. I explained this to you guys before. Instead of taking and allowing his queen to be developed, I'm just going to pull my bishop back to g6. And then I'm going to continue with my development. But he decides to jump in very quickly with his knight. And I kind of like these types of positions where I'm able to take on e5. And then after the pawn takes it, my knight, I play knight d7. Because now I have a pass pawn on d4. And it's kind of like a French defense type of position. Okay, this is not a pass pawn, by the way, guys. I thought it was pass, but it's not pass. There's some ideas of playing pawn to d4. And another good thing about my position is if he plays f4, he's putting his pawns on dark squares, which will make this bishop not really good. But instead of using the pawn, he decides to use the bishop. But okay, now the bishop isn't really doing much. Let's just continue with our development. I'm going to choose to develop my bishop to pin this knight. The position is kind of closed. Like it's not an open position. But yes, I am going to be giving up my bishop for the knight. So that way I'm able to start applying pressure to both of these weak pawns. So now I have two pieces attacking e5, but my queen is also attacking c3. And I don't really have a lot of intentions of taking on e5 because of this spin. He plays queen e1, but this is what we like to see. He's in defensive mode. That's what we want to see. Now I'm in attacking mode. Rook to c8. I have two pieces attacking c3. He only has one piece guarding c3. He has no way to add more defenders to see. Okay, that was a nice move. Rook to b1 was nice. Because now if I take, after all the trades, he's going to take here. And if I play this move pawn b6, which I am going to play, I don't really want to trade my very strong pawn for his good pawn. He's able to play this move, rook to b3. But maybe he has to trade first, because if he plays rook b3, there's knight c5 hits the rook. But then there's bishop to b5 check. So if he plays rook to b3, first I'm going to castle my king, just get my king out the center, not allowing any checks, and then I'm thinking of playing knight c5. Okay, bishop a6 was also very strong. It's also very annoying. He's hitting my rook. I can always take it the rook, but okay, that just does not work. I have to move my rook to some annoying square. Let's just put it back to b8. Like, I want to just get my king castled, to be honest. Right now, I'm attacking his pawn on c2. So even though he's gaining tempo on my rook, I'm technically still gaining some tempo on his pawn, which he decides to defend. No, I castle. Now the whole idea of knight c5 could come in. And if I'm able to play knight c5, I'm kicking out the bishop, which means I'm able to put the rook back on the c file, and I'm able to put the knight on a5, which hits the rook and target the weak pawn. And again, I say this a lot, this is why stronger players are strong than the average player or the weaker player. Because in a normal position, to you guys are okay, it's just equal. I don't know what to do. But I don't see this as an equal position. I see this position as this bishop is doing a defensive role. This bishop, okay, it's preventing my rook from going here. This rook is doing a defensive role, and his pawns are weak. So now we hit him with knight c5, chasing away that bishop. And now I want to play moves like knight a5, hit the rook, hit this pawn. But I'd prefer to have a rook on the c file first. I'm also not trying to rush this position as well. And just like that, the opponent blundered a pawn. So this is basically how it works, guys. How did he blunder a pawn? My queen is on the same line as his unprotected weak pawn on c3. And because he pulls his bishop back to d3, the queen no longer guards the pawn. So once I play the move knight takes d3, he has to take. Notice what I'm going to play here now. Queen takes e3, hits the unprotected rook, and I have two pieces attacking his pawn. Maybe his idea is, yo, I'm down by a pawn, but it's opposite colored bishops. That is valid. But let's see how he uses the opposite colored bishop. He guards his pawn. This rook isn't really doing anything, so let's swing it in the game. I mean, rooks do need files at the end of the day. And then he plays rook to d1, just doubling up on the pawn. Now, I have a very risky idea, which I am going to just go for it because I don't want him to play d4 trying to trade the queens off the board. I prefer to play d4. And if I play d4, it means his pawn on d3 is just weak. Now, another plan that I have to win this game, it's a long-term plan, but that's another strength that strong players has is we're able to develop long-term plans. If you notice, there's two pawns versus one pawn here. So I'm literally just planning on just rolling these pawns up the board. And when it comes to start rolling pawns, it's usually best to push the pawn without the counterpart. So the B pawn has no pawns in front of it. So I'm going to push the B pawn. And the plan from here is to go B4, maybe A5, A4, B3, and then we're going to have an additional advantage. And that's another thing that strong players use to evaluate their position. Like we're adding up the little wins that we have. I'm ahead by a pawn. That's a small win. I'm attacking his weak pawn. That's a small win. His pieces are doing defensive role. My pieces are doing attacking role. That's a small win. That's how we do it. We do not see the win immediately, but we see the plan. By the way, guys, if you haven't liked the video as yet, consider liking. This is the last time I'm going to ask, trying to hit 1,000 likes this video. And then he plays h4. Very simple plan. He wants to play h5, trap my bishop. I'm just going to play, well, if I play h5, then he plays g5. But I'm not afraid of that. Like, if he plays g4, I takes, queen takes. Eventually, bishop f5 attacks the queen. My very simple plan is just to roll these pawns up the board. And now he plays g3, and notice what he's doing. He's putting his pawns on dark squares, which means his dark squared bishop is not as good anymore. And my light squared bishop is now free to start roaming around the board. But I have a long-term plan, and I'm just going to stick to that long-term plan, which is to roll my pawn majority up the board. I don't want to play b3, by the way. It's best not to have like this outside pass pawn. It's best if like the b pawn is passed. So I'm pushing the pawn as far as possible. Then I want to get this pawn to a4. Then I want to play b3. Queen went back. Okay, now he's in defensive mode. There's no rook c2. There's no rook c1. Let's continue to roll our pawns up the board. Now he plays rook b2, which means now there's rook c1 that I need to be aware of. That doesn't work though. Let's continue to roll the pawns up the board. Because if he pulls the bishop back, he's losing the rook. If he puts the rook here, it's one less defender of this weak pawn. But One thing I missed is if he puts the rook here and I takes, queen takes, rook takes, then my B pawn is gonna be hanging, bro. So if he puts the rook here, I'm probably just not gonna take. Now he puts his king on a light square. That cannot be good. Because after everything happens, I'm gonna be able to have some checks. Like, I need to be aware of this rook move though. All right, pawn to A3, there's rook here. Pawn push, rook here. Yeah, let's just go pawn push. Because now I'm also not losing my B pawn. King G2 was just bad. Okay, do I take with the rook? I think taking with the rook is strong. Take with the rook, because this is also under attack. Like, take with the pawn, he's just not going to react to it. So let's take with the rook. If he goes here, hit my queen, I go here, hit the queen. He takes my queen, I take his queen. He takes my rook, I move. He gets behind my pawn, I push, and then his d pawn is hanging. So he took. Okay, think. Pawn takes, there's rook here. Can I just sack though? I think I think this is winning though. What? I mean, queen takes is also fine, but I want to show you guys how to play with imbalances. He didn't go for that though. I mean, I think he should have tried going for this actually, but he didn't. He played queen b2, and I'm just gonna use the time to continue rolling my. Please, guys, notice how my long-term plan is what is gonna help me to win this game. If he takes the queen, I take. Now I have connected pass pawns. I was about to say I'm threatening to take the queen, then push, but if I take, he's able to play bishop takes. But if I takes and he plays bishop takes, taking on d3 is a free pawn. And then I'm going to queen my pawn on b1. I really like this game. So he did trade. We take with the pawn. And now because I have connected pass pawns, the game is completely over. He's not only going to lose one piece. I think he's going to lose both of his pieces here. Okay, he moves the rook. Just be patient. No need to push, takes, push. We're only going to be winning one piece. We take it the rook. Once the rook move, we queen win the rook, then we queen win the bishop. After watching this video, remember to watch the video of myself explaining the theory of this line. It's going to be in the membership section of YouTube. And if you're not yet a member, I think you have to pay like $2 and some cents to be a member. The opponent resigns.